All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and yeah, don't mind that. I've got chains on it. It's secure. Um, my guest isn't here quite yet. I sent the link. It should work, but we'll just wait for a little bit until he shows up. In the meantime, though, welcome to the Halloween stream with, well, that's unsettling. Maybe there is some concern. But anyway, this is just our little pre-Halloween thing to discuss all things bizarre and macabre and spooky and who knows what else, and to follow up on different things that I probably should have followed up on during the first Don Glut interview, but because my brain wasn't working, I you know didn't. But anyway, while we're waiting, let's see. Little bit of an update for you guys. I have mentioned several times by now that I've been having a hard time getting, like, moving forward with Operation Red Dragon 2. That seems to be over. As of today, I have officially restarted again. And what I did was I read through what I'd already gotten to see if it was really stuff I could work with, or if I had to scrap it all and start over. Turns out I can work with it still. So here's hoping. Let's see who's in the chat to say hello to people. Punk Otaku Scribe is here. Hello. Dinosaurs indeed. Minecraft World is here. Good to see you there. Penguin agents are here. Mr. Glut will be here soon, I hope. And Bobby Reynolds is here. All right, so good turnout to start with. Still waiting. I'm not entirely sure what's might just be some technical difficulties. Either way, though, well, let's see. Like I said, I think I'm moving forward again with Operation Red Dragon 2. The Dragon. Operation Red Dragon 2. I slurred my words there for a moment. And I think I'll be able to get it going from here and hopefully have it up maybe by next year if I really set my mind to it, really put the pedal to the metal, nose to the grindstone sort of thing. But yeah, it turns out I just had to sort of get over a few mental obstacles. But otherwise, got a question in the chat of where where this skeleton came from. Yeah, wish I knew. It just showed up, and I haven't been able to get rid of it. Caused a lot of trouble. Well, okay, in all seriousness, it was a Halloween decoration thing that I got on sale at Walmart a couple of years ago after Halloween had ended, hence the sale. And I've always wanted to have some kind of a dinosaur skeleton in my room, in my home, and well, it's not exactly scientifically accurate, but I don't care. It looks neat. And I figured it would be an appropriate little addition to the backdrop tonight. Let's see, who else is... No literary works past, present, or future will be more important than Operation Red Dragon 2. From your lips to God's ears, I sure hope so. What do you think if Togura from War of the Monsters he would be like John Wick of kaijus? Got what? Well, I don't know. I haven't actually played War of the Monsters, so I'm going to say maybe. And I might not stay for long since tonight I'm planning to finally watch The Descent. Interesting choice. Yeah, from what I've heard, that's quite the intense picture. Still haven't heard from Let me just shoot him off a quick little message here to see if... All right, here's hoping. So... Let's see. Just to keep things going. So, how about this? We had somebody mention a movie they're going to be watching because it's spooky season. What other movies have people got? I actually recently watched a lesser-known Hammer horror movie called Demons of the Mind. It's definitely a more psychological one than you normally expect from Hammer. There aren't any vampires or Frankenstein monsters or creatures of any sort. They only kind of vaguely hint that something paranormal might be responsible, but for the most part, it's just a family of people who are a little bit crazy. And that's all I'll say, because it's difficult to explain from that point onward without getting into spoilers. What else we got? Have you heard of this on YouTube? This? Just random this? I don't know. Tomorrow I plan to watch Creature from the Black Lagoon. Definitely a good one. My all-time favorite of the Universal monsters. I mean, I know this isn't the original one, but it is technically a Universal product. I actually did recently manage to get the graphic novel for Creature from the Black Lagoon Lives, and started reading that. I think I'm about halfway through. Hopefully I'll get a video out on that at some point. Let's see. Tomorrow, wife and I will be watching one from this year titled The Front Room. One new horror on Halloween night is our tradition. Oh, nice. Have you heard of this on YouTube? Rambo Raff for Life. He is a movie reviewer. No, it doesn't ring a bell. Okay, but like I said, so halfway through the graphic novel, it's a slow burn. I will say that. Not slow burn in terms of it takes the creature a while to appear. More slow burn in that it's... I don't think we've really reached a point of the plot really kicking into high gear yet. But that's kind of surprising for a comic that's only 4 issues long. We'll see what happens. Looks like it's going in a pretty interesting direction. Not a direction I would have expected. And I've also learned apparently there's a Dracula one that already exists and a Frankenstein one that's coming. Although, interestingly enough, it looks like those are just adapting the original stories, just with a bit more embellishments, I guess, than what the original movies did. Whereas Creature from the Black Lagoon Lives is an actual original piece. But I haven't read those ones yet. The Frankenstein one's not releasing until next year. So I think the Mutos and Skullcrawlers have made good new Halloween monsters. Your thoughts? They are pretty messed up. The Skullcrawlers especially are sort of nightmare creatures, both in the visuals of looking like they have skulls for faces, and also the idea that they just eat everything. And the fact that they can be huge, but they can also be small, which means they can get to you a little bit easier. Speaking of the Universal monsters, did you hear about the new animatronics from the new Universal attraction park, Universal Epic? They look incredible. Yeah, I have seen those designs floating around, including a Wolfman that actually looks like a Wolfman. See, it wasn't that hard to do. But they look pretty good. I would say recognizable. They do continue that trend of giving the creature from the Black Lagoon teeth, which, that's also in the graphic novel. That's been a thing since the 80s, I think. Memory serves, the first place the creature was given teeth was Mad Monster Party. They just sort of gave him a single tooth, if I'm remembering correctly. And I don't know, does the creature really need teeth? I mean, it does make him look a little more ferocious, sure, but does he need it just for the design? I guess it depends. Also unrelated, have I seen Transformers 1? Not yet. I have heard it was good. The trailer didn't impress me. Then again, the trailer didn't impress anyone, and people are still coming out of it saying it's a great movie. I'm not in that big of a rush to see it because honestly, I'm not as big of a Transformers fan as other people of my generation. I mean, I liked Beast Wars when I was a kid, sure, but man, I'm sure I'll get around to it at some point. Oh, just heard back from him. Just want to make sure. Can people actually hear me? He said he couldn't hear me. But anyway, let me just quickly send the invite back to him. Pardon me just a moment. Okay. All right, good to see that people can hear me. That's what the response is. For some reason, the Gilman gets turned into a mindless beast when in company of universal monsters because Frankenstein monster is the only one allowed to be sympathetic. Well, the Wolfman can be sympathetic. I think original plan was he was the closest thing they had to a hero. And, ladies and gentlemen, here he is once more. Welcome back, Don Glut.
Yeah, sorry about that. We got disconnected. Sorry, folks, but happy Halloween. These are vintage items from my childhood.
Oh, yeah, really?
They probably go back to about 1948. We used to stick them in the window on Halloween night or before Halloween, and with a bunch of skeletons and witches and other things, you know.
And you still got them, too. Cool.
Huh. Yeah, oh, yeah. I'm a pack rat with certain things, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Can you hear me okay? I mean, am I coming? Am I coming in okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Everyone else can hear you too, right?
Right. So I can hear you. So is this the sequel or part 2 or the return of or Roman numeral 2? What is this? We're just going to continue, right?
I guess so. And, it actually did occur to me that as I was going back over our first little live stream together, towards the end, you had mentioned a couple of things that, had my brain been working, I should have followed up on. Like, for example, you said you're learning American Sign Language, correct?
I'm trying to. It's difficult. You know, one of the problems is I don't really have anybody to practice it with, you know.
Yeah, you know the feeling.
So, and I watch, you know, I can do a lot of signs, but not real fast. And I haven't learned yet, you know, like when you're learning another language, German or Spanish or Latin or whatever it is, you have to be able to think in that language. So you just speak naturally. You don't want to sit there and think, well, what word is this? And then put a sentence together. And when I watched, you know, the politicians on TV and they have like a signer off to the side, they're going so fast, I can't follow them. So it's difficult. I've been sort of lax lately in my practicing, but yeah, and the reason I wanted to learn it, first of all, I always like learning something new that I didn't know before. But I did a couple conventions, comic book conventions, and a deaf couple came up to me with a little girl who was about 13 years old, 14 years old, and they wanted to converse with me, and they did it through her as an interpreter. And you know, I said, well, I would really like to be able to talk to people like that directly, and that's what started me off. And there's a checkout guy at my supermarket who doesn't speak and is deaf, and sometimes I'll see him do a sign to something, you know, like he does this a lot, which means no. And you know, when they're bagging it, you know, and then he talks to the cashier, but I can never get his attention to try to converse with him with something, you know. So yeah, I'm learning. It's a slow process, but I am making a little progress.
Well, was there anything you wanted to demonstrate for us, or?
No, because I'm out of practice.
Okay.
You
Speaking of sign language, though, I did like when I was researching a particular video I was doing about Godzilla, I did learn that in Godzilla versus Kong, the little girl Gia who speaks through sign language.
yeah, she did it. She wasn't doing it real fast. So a few
Yeah.
things I picked up as I was watching that. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, but one thing I found out was that when she's signing at the end to Kong saying Godzilla not enemy, the sign for Godzilla, if I understand correctly, they sort of combined the sign for God and the sign for dinosaur.
Oh, I don't remember. I
It,
saw the movie a couple of times, but I
yeah,
don't.
I think that's what it is because I looked up the different ways, like how you sign this, how you sign that, and I think because they're kind of similar motions, they found a way to combine them. Just an interesting little bit of trivia there.
Yeah, I'm learning just the basics right now, and there's all kinds of refined things and subtleties and things which I haven't reached yet. And when I see these people signing on TV, like when somebody's giving a speech, they're doing things I've never seen before. I don't know what they're, I have no idea what they're doing and what they're saying.
Yeah, I can imagine. I just I can't pick up on any of it at the moment. I should probably learn to. One of these days.
We can do a conversation or an interview all in sign language. Nobody will know what we're talking.
That'd be interesting. Got a message in here. Mr. Glut, I have 3 of your books. I want to thank you for being very kind and generous to Japanese monster movies back when not every monster kid had respect for them. You were on the right side.
Well, it's funny you say that because some years ago, I guess it must be 8 or 9, 10 years ago, at the G Fest, they gave me an award, a demolished building award, which is very cool. I have it on my piano, and it's Godzilla knocking a building down. It's about that tall, and I got it. One of the reasons was that J.D. Lees, who runs that and who publishes G-Fan magazine, said that I was like one of the first people that actually took those movies fairly seriously and wrote about them in a serious fashion, and I'm glad I did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten that award. But I like writing about things I like, and I don't want to turn everybody off and say this was lousy or that was lousy. I like to be positive about those things. But he said I was the first one that actually tried figuring out the continuity and who the actors and all that sort of thing. So anyway, I have the award. I'm very grateful for that.
Well earned. And yeah, even today, like a couple weeks ago, there was a Variety article that published like a list of the best horror movies of all time, and it listed the original Godzilla, but it was a very backhanded compliment for it. So yeah, for some reason, people even today still associate it with cheese, even though Minus One came along and Minus One blew everybody out of the water. You said you finally saw it recently.
Yeah. Now it's coming. They're reissuing that to theaters with additional footage. You know anything about that or what?
From what I've heard, it's a little behind the scenes stuff at the beginning and end. So not necessarily not anything to the movie itself.
Like a bonus feature of some sort.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think maybe an archived Q&A with the director. But nothing. They didn't put anything into the movie proper. That remains unaltered.
No, it would have to be an ultra Q&A.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
Although super joke. Yeah. Well, that's what the Q stood for, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But I know people were curious to hear your thoughts on Minus One. So last time, but you hadn't seen it back then, so.
Well, I have seen it. In fact, I saw it just a few weeks ago, so it's fresh in my mind. I loved it. I thought I would like to have seen a little more Godzilla in it, but the story, the acting, the type of acting, everything. it was such a cut above everything else I'd ever done. And, I'm one of these continuity people, and I'm still trying to figure out, even though they probably had no continuity intended, trying to reconcile that with the 1954 film, which is supposed to be the first time you ever see Godzilla, but now we had it, some years before. So I don't know if it was a big cover up, they just hushed it up, or people forgot, or what. But I loved it. I thought it was wonderful. I have not seen the black and white version yet. I have the Blu-ray on order, so I imagine that bonus footage we were talking about will probably be included on that somewhere. I hope it will. Probably.
I know that they have that like, depending on what version you order, there are going to be different things added or not. Behind the scenes is one of them. And of course, like I remember at one point you posted on Facebook, does anyone know if there's a VFX breakdown?
Oh, yeah.
Because you said the water effects in particular looked really good. And surprisingly, it's all CGI.
Yeah, I worked on a TV show once where it was all dinosaurs and things for Discovery Channel. And
Dinotasia? Was that Dinotasia? Or
no, it was Reign of the Dinosaurs. And
okay.
Ricardo was behind that, was the director of that. But they told me, I came in as a writer and sort of a dinosaur consultant. They said, if you can avoid it, don't put any water in, because water is very expensive and hard to do. And I said, well, they did water pretty good back in 1953 when they did The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms,
Yeah.
But anyway, they told me to stay away from that.
Yep.
So I did.
And over in Japan, Takashi Yamazaki said, we're going to not just include water, we're going to have a whole set piece of Godzilla bursting in and out and chasing the boat, Jaws style. And it was just stunning. Like, people really did think that had to be a practical effect in that scene.
Yeah. And some of it, I thought, like the close-ups of him going through the water, where you saw just the head and the spines. To me, if I was making that movie, I would have saved some money by making that a practical, because you just put a guy in a suit and have him going by. But they did it for kind of a low budget, even though they went the extra 9 yards with details like that. It was amazing.
Well, Yamazaki's also an effects guy in addition to being a writer and director, so he knew a thing or two.
Mm-hmm. And hey, I have a question for you.
Yeah,
and this will affect the rest of this program today. The person that asked me about, what led to me talking about the award I got, I saw on my screen the question come up in print. Do the people watching the show see that too, or
which one?
The one who the viewer who comment asked the question and made a comment. Yeah. Now, do only we see that, or do the people watching the show see that?
They see it too.
Oh, okay. So the reason I asked is, like, when I do a lot of interviews, sometimes they ask me to incorporate the question in the answer. So I don't have to repeat anything I read down there necessarily.
No, you don't have to. They will see it.
Okay.
That's one of the nice things, conveniences about these live streams.
Okay.
So no pressure there. One thing that was interesting about Minus One, of course, is the Odo Island scene, like where Godzilla is a bit more traditional dinosaur, though obviously not. He's smaller, and there's that intense stuff of him attacking, and the main character Shikishima just sort of freezing up. Because, I mean, what do you think of that sequence?
I thought that was the whole thing was great. I mean, I have no objection to any of it. I'm still a little puzzled by the title. Does the title literally mean one earlier than the first one, 1954?
I think that's like part of the double entendre, I guess, or the pun. But it also kind of means, if you watched the original trailers, it's kind of also a reference to when it takes place in terms of history, because Japan's just lost the war, and they're at, as they put it, they're as low as they can get. They're at 0 if on the meter of how well they're doing. Godzilla comes along, minus. It gets worse, and if it gets worse from 0.
Okay, well, speaking of Godzilla, what is that to your right? That skeleton I see. What is it? Is it that big, or is it forced perspective, or what is that?
Oh no, it's just behind me. This is a little thing I got on sale after Halloween a couple years ago.
Okay.
If there's a switch in the mouth, actually, which if I turn it on, better. It'll keep doing that, so.
Man, my cats would love that.
It's not as cool as any of the fossil replicas you've got in your home, but.
Oh. Yeah, my house is cluttered with that stuff.
Speaking of which, I know you say that you work at the museum extracting fossils from Matrix, dusting them off and stuff. Done any more of that recently?
Well, I've been working on when I was given this is I came. The museum was sort of like on hold during the whole COVID thing, so all the volunteers were told not to come in. When they finally opened that up, which was about a year now, one of the first things they gave me to do, they gave me this block of matrix and some very simple tools, because they said what was inside of it was probably real fragile. So they didn't want to give me a power tool like a zip scribe. They gave me dental tools, picks and little things like brushes and things. And very gingerly, they asked me to remove the matrix. I've been working on this thing for months. And finally, a few weeks ago, it showed itself. And now I need to be more careful. But what we found in there, and mine were the first eyes to see this in about 145 million years, which is kind of cool. There's 2 strips of ossified tendons of a titanosaur. New Mexico, I believe it is. And a titanosaur is a certain kind of sauropod, the long necks and the giant dinosaurs. But it's a whole group of them called titanosaurs, most of which seem to be coming from South America. But we have one, and I have 2 strips. When they're extracted from that matrix, they'll be about this long a piece. But they're fragile, so I have to be very, very, very careful. And it's almost like you're afraid to touch them, but that's the only way you're going to get them out. So I've been very carefully, I don't want to say scraping, but just removing them, almost as one guy who used to be in our lab used to say, a grain at a time, which is an exaggeration. But that's my current discovery there. I'll be back there tomorrow on Halloween, so maybe they'll have some goodies there. I don't know. But so that's what it is. Yeah, I've been working on it for a long time. There's still a lot of work to be done on it, but it's really kind of a, I don't want to say a religious experience, but it's a very cool thought when you're taking that last bit of rock off and you see for the first time an actual bone in there or actual fossil in there of some sort. And that your eyes are the first eyes of any sort to see that since it was buried 145 million years ago.
Yeah. I mean, since it was inside the dinosaur, first eyes to see it ever, right? That's gotta be, man, that I can't even imagine what that must feel like. I would probably think like there'd be witnessing the birth of your first child and then extracting a fossil from the matrix. That's
also a little element of fear there because you don't want to damage it.
Yeah.
If you break it or you scrape too much, maybe the most important scientific aspect of that fossil is gone forever. And maybe it would have been a clue to something.
Yeah.
Something about dinosaur relationships or how they evolved or something about their habits or something. and you ruined it. You know, I've done that a couple times.
Mm.
It wasn't a pleasant experience. You feel guilty, like you just murdered someone.
Yeah, that it's about extreme emotions, right? It's either wondrous or what have I done?
Yeah.
But still, that is one heck of an update. I mean, that again, that's so neat that you're still doing all of that stuff.
Yeah, last time I talked to you, I don't think anything was uncovered yet.
No, not yet.
We had no idea what was in there. All we had was information as to where it was found, a specimen catalog number for the museum, you know, when it was found, who found it, but nobody knew what was inside of it. We knew it must have been something important because they wouldn't have, you know, wrapped it up in the field with burlap and all that. And so it was a big surprise, you know. Yeah, I didn't want to see like that episode of Night Gallery. Remember that episode of Night Gallery with John Carradine, where he tells the kids he's got a big surprise for them, and the whole episode is them, you know, they're digging. He tells them where to dig, and the big surprise is he gets out of the grave and he goes, "Surprise!" I didn't want it to be something like that, but it's been very rewarding and a very nice experience.
And did you, like, you said it's a tendon or two tendons from a titanosaur. Did you know that as soon as you saw it, or had to call somebody else in?
I think they knew it was some part of a titanosaur. I think they told me that before I ever uncovered anything, because, you know, when they're out in the field, they found all these bones associated with each other. They wrapped them all up and they put them on the truck or the helicopter or whatever. And so this was part of that assemblage, I think, of titanosaur bones, but didn't know what, you know, they didn't say what bone it was. And probably in the field, there wasn't enough of it showing, if anything, to really determine what it was.
Yeah, and the bones can be out there in any order, right? It's not necessarily just all laid out like this. The bones can be scattered.
And many times they're crumbling, they're in pieces, you know, they have to be glued on the site, you know, and it's a long, tedious, very careful to do undertaking.
It's those fragmentary blues you sing about on the Dinosaur Tracks albums, right?
Well, that song, that's kind of a wishful thinking song, because you almost never find a whole skeleton missing one bone. You know, that was just kind of the fun thing.
That was missing a bone blues. Fragmentary blues is.
But you know where I got the idea from that?
Oh yeah.
A good friend of mine used to be, he's dead now, unfortunately, was the old R&B singer Screamin' Jay Hawkins.
Oh.
Screamin' Jay did, you know, he did I Put a Spell on You. And he did a song called Constipation Blues. And it was, you know, the lyrics were funny, but it was performed like a real, like, you know, B.B. King or something. It was performed like a real heavy-duty, hardcore blues song. And I said, aha, you can do a blues song and make it humorous. And that's what gave me the idea. So I tried to do the instrumentation and everything on it, just like you would hear in a regular blues song, you know, and it was a fun song to do.
It's got the right meter. It's got the repetition for blues. And hey, why not make blues funny? If you can't laugh at life's problems, what can you laugh at? Very cool.
And I thank you for that great review you gave sometime back on those songs.
Thanks again. And thank you, of course, for once again for sending those albums along. Let's see. Something else I meant to ask you, or that I should have followed up on towards the end of the last time. I remember you said that when talking about like overcoming writer's block and everything, that you frequently revisited The Man in the Iron Mask as a little well of inspiration.
And then about 4, 6 times, right?
Yeah. And what I should have asked back then, and I'm going to ask now, is why The Man in the Iron Mask specifically? What is it about that one that keeps drawing you back?
I don't know. I mean, there's probably a dozen or more other stories I could have done. But I did it the first time I don't remember if it was for Gold Key Comics or the Tarzan Lord of the Jungle animation TV show. I think it was one of those two was the first one. And it lent itself to the other things in the story, lent itself to that story so conveniently that it just, I don't know. The Beast in the Iron Mask, the Creature in the Iron Mask, the Creep in the Iron, I did a whole batch of them. And I like that story. I always liked the story. The movie's based on that story, and it was apparently Alexander Dumas when he wrote it. It was based loosely on some actual historical character, so there was a little bit of truth in it too.
Yeah, although from what I've heard, the figure who would become the Man in the Iron Mask, like if the figure was real, like people who observed him said it was actually more of a velvet mask, but iron is more dramatic.
It was a cloth thing, I believe, and I don't know if the twin brother thing was based on anything or if that was just for the movie. But I saw the movie when I was a kid on television in Chicago. The one with Louis Hayward, and I loved it. I loved those kinds of movies back then. Before I really got into monsters and horror films and all that, I really liked swashbucklers. I liked movies with swords and knights and all that kind of stuff. And that was one of them. They used to show it every once in a while on local Chicago TV.
I don't know if I've actually seen the classic version yet. I know I saw the one they made, the more recent one, like in the 90s or so with Leonardo DiCaprio. That was certainly a fine adaptation in its own right, but I'm
sure there were probably silent movie versions too, but the classic version was directed by James Whale.
Ah, that explains it.
Peter Cushing is in it as a small speaking part.
Huh.
It was just, and then of course later on, characters in the comics like Dr. Doom and all that all have sort of like smack back a little bit to Man in the Iron Mask.
Yeah. Or sometimes like Iron Man, it's all over.
Yeah. And Dumas, when he wrote those stories, he had crossovers and continuity. The Three Musketeers and D'Artagnan turn up in other things, and I've always liked that sort of thing. When I was a kid and I read the world's finest comics with Superman and Batman. I mean, that was a big deal for me back then. Now it's the movies.
I remember I was younger and I was reading some version of Ivanhoe, and I was shocked to learn that they kept mentioning Robin Hood. I was like, oh, hey, Robin Hood's part of a shared universe?
Yeah, well, in the movie, the one with, was it Robert Taylor, I think? Or
possibly?
I think it was Robert Taylor. Anyway, he's in that, but they don't call him Robin. They call him just Sir Lockley or something like that. I guess they didn't. I guess they figured putting Robin Hood into a movie about another hero like that, where the movie was called Ivanhoe. It wasn't called like Ivanhoe and Robin Hood. It would take away from the prestige of the titled character. So they, or maybe it would even confuse viewers. Like, oh, what's Robin Hood doing in this?
Yeah, I don't see why it would be confusing personally. I mean, but it just sort of makes sense to me that these characters would coexist somehow. I mean, that was what Philip Jose Farmer did when he put together the whole Walt Newton family tree thing, saying, all these pulp characters, detectives and whatnot.
Tarzan Alive and all those things. Yeah. That was a huge inspiration for me. That's what I think gave me the idea when I was writing those Gold Key comics of having Dr. Spector, Degar, and Trag all related to one another. That all was inspired by Phil Farmer, who was a friend of mine. And, I would see him now and then. And he was a cool guy.
I can imagine. I mean, like, well, obviously I got to follow up on that somehow, but let's see. So, I wasn't expecting the conversation to go this direction, but so like, what can you tell us about Philip Jose Farmer and like what it was like interacting with him? But which of his books you would recommend, things like that?
Well, there were I didn't know him real well. I would usually see him at Jim Harmon's house. Jim Harmon was a real good friend of mine, and Jim Harmon was one of those early science fiction writers, and was also really big on the old time radio. And Jim would have family, get-togethers at his home every now and then, and people like Les Tremayne would be there, and Phil Farmer would be there, and various science fiction writers of that period. And the last time I saw a film was, strangely enough, at the Natural History Museum. This is long before I became a volunteer. I was there visiting Mary O'Donnell, who was the chief preparator of fossils at that time in the vertebrate paleontology lab. And she says, "Oh, Mary Leakey is going to give a speech today in the auditorium. Why don't you come down and see it? There'll be refreshments and everything." I said, "Okay." And so I went down there, heard the speech, had some refreshments, and I turned around, there was Phil Farmer. So that was the last time I saw him. And but he was inspiration to me because he did crossover stuff, and he had, like, the Shadow was related to the, whoever, and was really the spider with a different disguise, or all this kind of stuff. And I actually wrote based on that idea, a treatment for what would have amounted to Dracula versus Sherlock Holmes. And I actually called up Christopher Lee, and I wanted him to be in the movie. And it was when he was living here in the States. And he said, "No, I don't want to play that character unless it's done exactly like, Bram Stoker wrote him." I said, "Well, no, this is, you'd be playing Sherlock Holmes in this." And he says, "No, it still wasn't what he wanted." And so he didn't. But it never got beyond, but I had everybody. I had, Professor Moriarty was really Dracula, and Jekyll and Hyde was really Jack the Ripper. And, I had all these characters that had like double and triple lives. And Renfield was actually Jack the Ripper. I mean, I can't remember what the whole thing was, but it was an intellectual exercise, let's put it that way. And it was fun, but never went anywhere.
That's unfortunate, because it sounds interesting.
Yeah, it was called The Study in Blood. I remember the title of it.
Ah, yeah, the Study in Scarlet, Study in Blood. Yep. I do know Christopher Lee's relationship with Dracula certainly got complicated. He did manage to do at least one movie that was more or less as Stoker wrote it. From just
it was such a bad movie, though. I mean, it was so low budget, and just Franco of all people directed it. I interviewed Chris Lee back in 1974, and I remember the year because he was in town promoting Dracula AD 1974. Or was it 74? Yeah,
72.
That was 72. Okay, and we were at the hotel he was in over on the Beverly Hills Hotel on Wilshire Boulevard, and I brought my big reel-to-reel heavy tape recorder, and it was so good. I mean, talk about incorporating the question and the answers and all this, right? That Severin Films, when they put out that movie, Count Dracula, I let them use my interview with Lee, and they cut me out altogether. They just had him as like giving a monologue, and it worked. It just flowed. And then they intercut it with all kinds of film clips and movie stills and posters and things, and made that a bonus feature when they put out that Count Dracula movie. So
go figure.
So people can hear that. And he talks about that movie. He talks about Count Dracula and all of his portrayals, really. He was telling me then he wanted to stop playing the part. He said, "You'll never guess what the next one's going to be. Dracula is played as kind of a combination of Dr. No and Howard Hughes." So that was satanic rites.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Dracula AD 1972 is a weird one. Although I did recently learn it was kind of based on the recent Whitechapel vampire panic that had happened.
Oh.
So yeah, a Dracula movie based on true events, kind of.
And Caroline Munro, I think, never looked more beautiful than she is in that movie.
Mm. And man, meeting Christopher Lee must have been neat. He's one of those people I would have wanted to meet. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us and won't be coming back, unlike Dracula.
But the last time I saw him was he was in town. Oh, it must be about 10 years ago now, promoting something or other. I forgot what. And he was the old Creature Features store in Burbank, and I live in Burbank, so I went over there. And the line, the line was going around the block to get in the store. And so I saw the guy at the door and I said, "Would you mind telling Chris that, I'm here?" Because he knows me, and maybe he'll just say hello, sign. He was promoting his CD where he's singing.
Oh, right, the Charlemagne albums.
Yeah, and I said, "I'll buy a copy of the album," and so anyway, when Lee found out I was there, and that was, there was a long line of fans, he said, "Oh, bring him in. I'd like to see Don. Bring him in." So they brought me in, and forgetting about the line, and then he talked to me for about 20 minutes. I couldn't get away, and all these people in the line were getting really pissed off, because there I was taking up all their time with Chris. And he said, "I've been following your career, and I'm very proud of you." Blah 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 blah. And I, was hoping we could go out to dinner or something, but his time here was really short that time. So that was the last time I saw him in person.
Well, hey, it was worth it then. I mean, apologies to everyone else in that line, but sounds like it was a good one. And
if any of you are watching the show tonight, I apologize. And it wasn't me. He was doing most of the talking. So,
and it was promoting the albums. You've listened to his Charlemagne albums, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah.
What are your thoughts on those?
I think they should have done Ghost Riders in the Sky though in a slightly higher key, because when he goes, he can barely hit those notes. I mean, I can't do it, but it would have sounded a little, just maybe one note higher. Just one. Made it sharp or something. I don't know.
Oh well, but yeah, who would have guessed Christopher Lee, a metal singer, and the officially on record as the oldest metal singer.
On record? Oh, you made a pun.
Well, yeah, but also world record.
He loved opera and singing opera.
Yep. Yeah. I can only imagine, his voice must have been made for opera, the low bass tones especially, or his is one of those iconic voices. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Although, I guess since we brought up Christopher Lee, and this is sort of a Halloween stream, and he's involved in both Dracula and Frankenstein and everything. I have been reading up more on all of your stuff and everything. I've been working my way through the new Adventures of Frankenstein here.
Oh, and there's two volumes.
Yeah, I'm still on volume 1.
12 books altogether. 6 per.
Yeah, everyone, this is just the first 6. That's a lot. But it
was originally only 11. And one of the readers, one of the reviewers complained that in the 11th book, it didn't come. I mean, there's a scientist named Dr. Bert Winslow who appears in, sometimes 2 or 3 in a row, sometimes every other one. But he was like to Dracula what Van Helsing was, or what, they were like mortal enemies. And in the last 11th book, stupid me, I didn't bring him in there to finish off the monster. And for 30, 40 years now, those books have been out there without a real final conclusion, like Robin Hood versus Battle of Rathbone, I mean, the one-on-one thing between the hero and the villain. And I talked to Bill Cunningham when we put these out through his company, Pulp 2.0 Press. I said, 12 is an even number. If we have 6 books in each one, it's better than having 6 in one and 5 in the other. And there was this complaint about not having that final confrontation. How about if I write another novel? And so I wrote one more, and it was, it was like not getting back on a bicycle or something. I mean, it was like no time had passed. I mean, the characters were fresh in my mind, and so I did one that finished them all off. But then I couldn't finish off the monster exactly permanently, like taking them apart or anything like that, because in my, I think, 10th book, Tales of Frankenstein, one of the stories is set in the future, and the monster turns up. He's found encased in lava or something, solidified lava by aliens. So I had that story. So I had to end my 12th novel in a way that would have continuity with the short story I'd written about 20 years earlier with the beginning of the story. And so now there's 12 books instead of 11.
Well, there you go. And what inspired the New Adventures of Frankenstein in the first place?
Well, this would have been in the 1960s. And I was at the time very heavily into Edgar Rice Burroughs. Edgar Rice Burroughs had continuity, and he had crossovers. Tarzan goes up to Lucidar, and all that.
Yep.
And I loved that, and I loved the Universal movies, and I loved the Hammer films. And I was sitting there in my apartment one day, and I said, nobody's ever done a Frankenstein series, which would have continuity, which would have crossovers and bring back all the old monsters, Dracula and a werewolf and a mummy and, whatever. And I just started writing them. And there have been various, as I got better as a writer, I would read an early version. I said, oh, this is terrible. And I'm going to rewrite this or revise it. So there's several different versions out there. I'm hoping people are only reading the current ones, though. And some of them are in foreign languages, so I don't worry about those too much. But these are the ones. The one you just showed, these are the definitive versions. And with all the typos corrected that crept into the Scary Monsters versions that came out some years ago. Anyway, yeah, and those are fun to write. I loved writing those. And I had a great time bringing back those old characters in that 12th book.
Yeah, it's I'm still kind of early in it. I have finished the first one. I'm working my way through the second one, which is Terror of Frankenstein.
Now, those books are also inspired very much by the Dick Briefer Frankenstein comic books that came out in the 1950s before the code came in, and also Republic serials. So I would have fist fights in barns and things like that. Car chases and all that kind of, and then the pulp magazines, the Shadow. I love the Shadow, and so all those things influenced. They all sort of came together, and that the result.
Yeah, and I also think I detect a hint of Jules Verne in Terror of Frankenstein with the sea monster safe submarine.
Yeah, the submarine.
The Tylosaur, correct?
Yes, the Tylosaur. Wait till you get to Frankenstein in the Lost World.
Oh, yeah. That's at the end of this first volume.
I won't tell you which one. One of them is a Western. I took a Western plot, but I set it in Europe, and they had, monsters, but there's all the stuff, barroom brawls and all that kind. I took all the tropes from because I love Westerns too. And just to be different, as a change of pace, I took one of them. One of the novel I was writing at the time said, I'm gonna plot this like a Western. There's even a masked Zorro type character.
Oh, nice.
Who rides a horse and has a sword and a whip and all that.
Cool. I'm looking forward to getting to that one. As I've been looking through your stuff, you also you have your own kind of pulp character. He gets mentioned as a fictional character in one of these, the character Jawbreaker.
Oh, Jawbreaker. When I wrote Jawbreaker, I wrote that in the 60s. It's set in the 60s. When I wrote it, it was the 60s. So everything that I put in there, I was experiencing at the time, the nightclubs I was going to and all that sort of thing. And the same with Brother Blood, same thing. And Jawbreaker, the name was inspired by the candy. I don't know if they still make it, but there were a candy called Jawbreakers.
I think they might.
Yeah,
Nobody likes it, I don't think, but
but the character itself was inspired by the Copperhead from the Republic serial, The Mysterious Dr. Satan.
I recently watched that.
Yeah, and all the names of the characters are based on stuntmen I knew, and all, Tom Steele and Dale Van Sickle and Bart Andrews, and that was a fun one to do. So that was done, and I'll tell you the thing. When I wrote the first draft of that in the '60s, you think that book it was just sitting around. I think it got rejected by a few places, and then a few years ago, I was talking to Bill Cunningham. And I said, I got this novel. I think the plot is fine. I just have to rewrite it and polish it up. He said, yeah, it sounds like something we could do. And so I still kept it in the 1960s, but it was set at a fictional movie studio called Democracy Pictures, which was a takeoff I've used many times on Republic Pictures. And it was just, I had a scene in there when I wrote it in the 60s. I had it because the chapters all had cliffhanger endings, and then there was some kind of solution in the next chapter. I had Jawbreaker locked in a safe, and the next chapter opened. Oh, the chapter ended with the gangsters opening the safe and firing their machine guns into the safe. And you think, well, maybe Jawbreaker got killed in the safe. And then the next chapter, I used the cop-out answer for saying, I heard this many times, even in the movie Houdini with Tony Curtis. They said, well, how did you get out? Well, safes are meant to be not to be broken into, not broken out of. Well, I thought that was too cheap an answer. So I phoned up my good friend, Jim Steranko, who used to be an escape artist. I called him up, and I got his answering machine. I said, Jim, I'm not asking you to reveal any trade secrets or anything or give away anything, but I've got my hero locked in the safe. How do I get him out? And then about 2 a.m, and Jim's a real night owl, and he lives 2 a.m. my time. He lives in New Jersey, so add 3 hours. I get the phone rings, and it's Jim Strankel. I was screening my calls, and he's just laughing his head. He couldn't control himself. I said, what's so funny? He said, nobody has ever asked me that question. And he talked me through it. So the way Jawbreaker gets out of the safe was the real deal. And so I dedicated the novel to him and to Jim.
Nice.
Jaunty Jim Steranko.
That I'm really looking forward to that one too, because I really do like it. Says listed on Amazon as pulp heroes in the traditional sense or something like that, and I've really been going back to those old pulp characters. I mean, the Shadow obviously left his taste in hats, Green Hornet, things like that. Yeah, and you mentioned, like I said, Jawbreaker's mentioned in the second of the Frankenstein books, played by one of a character who's an actor who's clearly going to be important. So
yeah, there's continuity running through everything I've ever written, I think, except maybe Bugs Bunny and Tweety and Sylvester. Everything else had continuity somehow, pretty much. And I wrote a novel called Brother Blood, and it was in 3 sections, each told in first person by a different character. The character name, because I used to use a lot of pen names. I write a lot of things under different names. I took all those pen names and I made them characters in Brother Blood. And then I killed them all off. So this is the end of those pen names. But I made them real characters and they were killed off. But there's continuity between Brother Blood and Jawbreaker. And in I think Terror of Frankenstein, there's a mention of Democracy Pictures.
Yep. So, yeah, it's sprinkling the little breadcrumbs like that. I try to do that in my own writing too. Not like overdoing it like recent Marvel movies have done, where, now I have to do homework in order to understand the latest entry. Just sort of throwing a little hint that if you've read my other books, you'll know what it's referring to.
I am so flattered and so delighted when somebody spots something like that.
Mm.
They point it out to me and say, "Hey, this character was in some comic book or one of your movies, or both," and
Yep.
shows that somebody cares and is paying attention. Because when I put all those, I guess they call them Easter eggs now. I said, well, probably when I'm long gone, and somebody with a lot of free time on their hands is going to figure this all out. And there have been articles in magazines, fanzines, where people have figured out certain portions, like just in the comic books or just in the novels, but never all together. I have things in my movies that relate to amateur films I did, when I was a teenager or younger than a teenager. In my movie Tales of Frankenstein, I have a character called Gregor Frankenstein, who's a descendant of Victor. That character originated in one of my old amateur movies that I made as a teenager called The Teenage Frankenstein Meets the Teenage Werewolf. So, I don't know who's ever going to pick up on all of it, if that's even possible. But there's a lot
there. Who knows? Maybe I'll try at some point. I've actually got a fan who's already trying to put together a timeline of when all my different books take place. Shout out to him. So yeah, it is neat when people finally pick up on things like that. You throw a little thing in there, you wonder, is anyone going to notice? And
yeah. When I was running Dagar the Invincible for Gold Key Comics, which is sword and sorcery comic, and I don't like sword and sorcery. I don't like to read it. I don't like to write it, but I've written a lot of it anyway. And then I got the gig to write Call at Marvel, and this is another barbarian type character, and I had one character in Dagar, his girlfriend, get fed up with his lifestyle, and she rides off into the sunset. And then she turns up in Call the next issue with amnesia. And then she finally remembers who she is without saying the name, and she goes back to him, but then the book got canceled. I was never able to bring Dagar and the girlfriend back together again because the book got canceled. But I was doing that kind of thing all the time.
Yeah, that's it. Don't you also just hate it when that sort of thing gets in the way? But again, I would love to track all of that down, and I don't know, at some point. Let's see what sort of questions have popped up in the chat. So, kind of scary related. Have either of you heard of the show Primeval?
I've heard of it, but I've never seen it. I think I've seen stills, photos from it, but I've never seen the show.
I think I watched the first 2 seasons. It's okay. Billing it as a dinosaur show is kind of inaccurate because the first actual dinosaur doesn't show up until the second season, or series as they call it in England. Although I never continued it for whatever reason. I don't necessarily have any excuse. It wasn't like it was offensively bad or something. Just watched it to a certain point, never picked it back up. Let's see. Gentlemen, I think he's what are your thoughts on the Gill Man, and what would you do with a franchise if you could work with it? That's Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Creature from the Black Lagoon?
Yep.
I never thought about it because the original is so good by itself. I don't know if I'd really care to see a remake. I mean, it would probably be all done with CGI and it would look different. And I don't know. I know there have been attempts over the years for a remake. They would probably do it I don't even Jaws is an old movie, but they would probably, like they did with Godzilla when they made that first American Godzilla was completely different. I don't know if they could ever get a look that's so iconic, and so I mean that suit they made was perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I'm just quickly trying to scroll and see if I can find it again. There's a movie that the trailer just dropped for. It's not a creature movie, but it's clearly creature inspired. Can I find it somewhere? It's no, that's not it. Maybe someone in the chat knows what it is, but it's like it's set during World War II, and it involves an Allied soldier and a Japanese soldier stuck on an island, and there's this creature type monster that's also
Godzilla Minus One.
Well, not exactly that, but it's not a typical name. I think it's the name of the creature, but it's like not in English, certainly. So I don't remember what it was, but they're actually doing that one with practical effects from the look of it. So you never know. Let's see what else. I do have a question for our guests tonight. Which horror movies inspired you creatively speaking, and which scary stories scared you as a child? Lastly, what are your thoughts on Schwartz's famed book?
Well, first of all, I don't know what Schwartz's famed book is. What is that?
I'm not entirely sure either. Maybe now that we've said that. Oh, Scary Stories to be Told in the Dark. I think that's what yeah.
I'm not familiar with that. But as far as what scared me as a kid, I was scared by. I saw The Wizard of Oz in the theater when I was about 4 years old. Scared me to death. And especially when that witch points right into the camera, goes, "You're next, Dorothy," or whatever she said. I was scared by Song of the South because, I lived in a predominantly white neighborhood in Chicago. I'd never seen a black person before. And when that Uncle Remus came on the screen, that big face on that huge screen laughing, I didn't know what to make of it. I was scared of that. And when I was a little, people talk about scary movies. I don't find movies scary at all. I haven't since I was a kid. When I was a little kid, I was scared of dark rides at amusement parks. When I went to bed at night, I'd have a light on in the next room with the door open, so it wouldn't be complete dark. I was scared of everything as a little kid. And then I was a Cub Scout, and one of our meetings, all the kids were talking about this new movie called The Creature from the Black Lagoon that was coming out. And I was kind of afraid to go see it, but I didn't want to be a sissy. So I did go to see it, but only in 2D. I wasn't ready to move up to 3D yet. And the movie was, to me, the monster and everything was not scary. It was cool. Then an article very shortly after that movie came out in Collier's magazine. It was about the Bud Westmore makeup studio at Universal International. And they had color photos, and they showed how they did it. And at that point, I was never afraid of horror pictures anymore. I have to admit that when I saw Night of the Living Dead for the first time in the theater, not knowing what to expect, Psycho, same way, and The Exorcist, it was creepy walking home, I'll tell you, and going home. But I was never scared of those. When people tell me they were scared by the Wolfman or scared by the Hammer films, I can't relate to that, because to me those movies, I went to those movies not to be scared. I didn't like to be scared. To me, being scared is walking down a dark alley at night in Chicago. I went to those movies to be entertained. Same reason I went to see a Western or a comedy or a jungle movie or whatever else. I wanted to be entertained, and those movies entertained me. The funny thing about The Creature, though, what got me in trouble, was right before I saw it, Life magazine ran a full-page photo of the creature carrying Julie London out of the water. The wheels started turning, okay? I cut the picture out. I was very creative as a kid, and I like to draw and like to make things. I made a wanted poster with that photo, and I tacked it on the tree in front of our house on our street where we lived. And all the little kids saw that, terrified that, because we lived in with a long walk, but we walking distance of Lake Michigan. All the little kids were screaming that this creature was going to come out of Lake Michigan and kill them all. And their parents got wind of this, and the parents all dumped on my mother. How can you raise your son like this? Yada, yada, yada. So anyway, that was my personal adventure with the creature when I was a little boy.
Oh boy.
And I'm
classic.
Not apologizing to anyone. I had a great time doing that.
Oh no, you shouldn't. I mean, that's great.
But it took me years to get another copy of that magazine without that page torn out.
Yeah.
Which I still have.
Nice.
And Julie Adams, because you can't really tell in the photo, I asked her, because we used to do conventions together, I said, is that really you in the photo, or is it a double just for the photo session? She said, no, that was really me. So that clears up a mystery.
There you go. Let's see, what other questions have... Oh, the other part of that question was the inspiration. Like, what horror movies... what was it? Which horror movies inspire you creatively speaking?
The movies that inspired me creatively, one's not really a horror picture, but a science fiction picture. Beast in 20,000 Fathoms, when I saw that. I was just getting into dinosaurs at that time. And the other one was House of Frankenstein. I saw House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and The Mummy on a triple bill in a theater about a year before they ever came to television. I didn't know that. I mean, I thought House of Dracula was only going to have Dracula. House of Frankenstein was only going to have the Frankenstein one. Lo and behold, they were both in each other's movies, and the Wolfman, and the Hunchback, and the Mad Scientist. So those two movies inspired me as a kid to start make my own versions of those movies, amateur movies, and which I shot in 16 millimeter, not 8 millimeter. And just one thing kind of led to another. But it was those two movies that really started the whole thing off for me. And
those are the ones that are like the continuity ones. So I can see how that gets back to. Yeah.
I mean, I was astounded. When I went to see those three movies, and the first thing that comes on the screen is the title, House of Frankenstein. Boris Karloff. Now, at that time, I always thought Boris Karloff played the monster. I didn't know other actors played the monster. The first scene in the movie is a wagon going by with a sign, Count Dracula's Skeleton. Wait, did they get the reels mixed up? What's going on? Is it a Dracula movie now? Is this really House of Dracula? Because I didn't really pay attention to the posters outside when they showed the monster. So that was a real confusing thing for me when I first saw it. But and then I tried to connect the Wolfman to the Werewolf, the movie with Stephen Rich that I seen in the theater just a few weeks or a few months before on a double bill with Earth versus the Flying Saucers. And so it was a real mix. See, in those days, we didn't have monster magazines yet.
Yeah.
To figure these things out. You see these movies and, well, this one ended with this happening. This one began with that happening. Maybe this movie came after that movie, and that was one of the fun things about it. Now everybody knows everything. Just look it up on the internet. But that discovery, that hunting for information and having limited places to look, didn't have computers or anything, it was, a lot of it was just memory.
Yeah. Let's see. Sometimes this kind of question annoys me, but of all the feature films you've written and directed, which is the one of which you are most proud and why? And if you do one more feature film, what will it be? The only reason I say it annoys me is because, picking your favorite thing that you've made is like picking your favorite child or something. Or at least that's how I see it.
Yeah. Tales of Frankenstein is my favorite movie that I directed, wrote, produced. And it was to me, it was just like a playing. It was like playing in a playground or something. And if I make another movie, I have a script already called Tales of Frankenstein Book 2. And all the stories came from a collection of short stories I wrote called Tales of Frankenstein. There's also a graphic novel called that, which is based on the movie. But I took 4 stories from that collection, and that's what became the movie. But there's a lot of other stories in that collection, and it's ready to go. If somebody wants to hand me the money, we'll get free production tomorrow. That's what I would like to do. I also have a vampire movie I'd like to do, which is a combination of Carmilla and Death Wish, kind of a streetwise movie, And
that's quite a combination. I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered like doing Kickstarter or something to try getting it funded?
I've tried Kickstarter and I've tried Indiegogo, and they both all been disastrous. I've got 5,000 Facebook friends, and I would put up there, I need to raise so much, like $5,000, $10,000. If every one of you would throw in $1, I could do this. And all I get are happy faces and likes and good luck and that, but nobody wants to put any money in. But then when they have a project, they all hit me up for it. I'm always getting, when I want to contribute to this Kickstarter fund or this Indiegogo project, and I don't do it because I have a long memory. And when nobody helps me out, and I've launched about 5 of these Indiegogo campaigns already, and almost raised no money, and I have really good gifts that I give out, and including parts of the movie, and it's really tough. Everybody wants to like your post, but nobody wants to send you $1. $1 I thought everybody could afford. But
well, if you ever try again, I would do my best to help promote it and donate and whatnot. What else have we got in the?
I appreciate that very much.
Let's see. Here we go. Writing question here from Gecko the Ben. I had a book idea that, after outlining, is about 40,000 pages, so I need to cut things out and split it up. I was going to keep it to 200 pages a book. Do you have any advice?
Just cut out things that slow it down, that don't relate to anything, if they don't relate to the story. Try not to cut out things that enrich the characters, because characters are always more important than the plot in a movie or a story or whatever. And unless you're doing a melodrama, a straight melodrama where the plot trumps the characterizations. But I'm ruthless with my stuff when I cut things out. When I'm reducing a film script down to maybe 100 pages or a comic book story, that I write these stories for Vampirus Carmilla and Shudder magazine, and I like to keep them 6 pages long. A lot of the other writers write them in 5. I'm most comfortable with 6. I used to write them in 10 for Gold Key and Warren, but 6 is I make a nice, concise story. And I just ruthlessly cut stuff out. I find that one way to cut things out, especially in a movie script, is dialogue. Characters in low-budget movies always say things that in a real movie, let's say, they wouldn't need to say anything. So the characters are driving away in a car. The guy in the street goes, "There they go." You don't have to say "there they go." You can see them go. Or Clint Eastwood will say something, and all he has to do is squint, and you know what he's thinking, you know what he's saying. Where in a low budget thing, they always tell you too much, and I'm always cutting. And I've learned how to be very ruthless with my own work, because it just makes things better. And I find out in the movie script, the more I take out of it, the more dialogue I take out of it, the better it seems to be.
Because then you find the ways to represent it visually.
Yeah, that's one way you can always tell too. Amateur writers, they always put too many adverbs and too many adjectives in. I think it was Ernest Hemingway or somebody like that, very well-respected writer, who said you can always say "he said" or "she said." You don't have to say "he exclaimed violently" or something. He shouted. I once one of my first novels that, after the Frankenstein novels, I was supposed to write for a company called Manor Books, a novel involving insects doing terrible things. Well, that book became bugged, and it's out right now. It's just been reissued. But I didn't really know how to write a novel yet, even though I'd written a bunch of them. And I wanted this to be really professional. So I called up my friend George Clayton Johnson. I said, I want you to come over and teach me how to write a novel. He said, okay. And he came over, and I showed him a page I'd written. And it was a guy in the story, the part of the story was a guy in a car, trapped in a car, and insects were attacking the car. And he had to roll up the window because the window was rolled down. He was afraid all the bugs were going to fly in the car. And I described how he grasped the handle. This is, in the days when you still had windows that you rolled up, and he gradually turned it, clockwise. And he said, no, all you have to say is he rolled up the window. And that a little light went off in the back of my head. And I said, yes, you're right. That's what it is. And he said, and somebody else told me, you read Ernest Hemingway, or you read Earl Stanley Gardner, the Perry Mason books, and it's Perry Mason walked in the room. He sat down. He poured himself a cup of coffee. I mean, it was, just
very matter of fact.
Yeah, but I don't read people. I don't, when somebody says, will you read my book? Before I send it, I won't do that anymore. I make too many enemies, because they always come back with all the adjectives and all the flowery things, thinking that makes them sound like a good writer. It doesn't. It makes them sound like an amateur writer. And then when I call them out, I say, well, you should take this, you should take this out. Let me show you how you should say this. Then I never hear from them again. I lost my friend. And so don't anybody send me any samples to read. I just don't do it. Plus, I think Steven Spielberg won't read unsolicited manuscripts that come in, because everybody's always suing him, saying you stole my story. It's amazing how you can be influenced and not know it. I wrote a story for one of my Gold Key comics, one of my Mystery Comics Digest, and that was a great idea, And then about 5 or 6 years later, no longer than that, it was like 10 years later, I'm watching reruns of Twilight Zone, and there was my story. I somehow subliminally remembered elements from that story. I put it into mine. In fact, there was actually 2 Twilight Zone stories that came back to haunt me like that. And I had no idea I was plagiarizing. I wasn't plagiarizing. I thought they were my original ideas. And the stories I wrote were pretty good, and they bought them. They're out there right now. But that's what I was influenced by unknowingly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember if I've ever had an instance like that. I don't think I've ever had an instance where I've written something, put it out there, and then later realized it was something else, because my brain's the sort that never really shuts off, and it'll be like I'm coming up with an idea, and then suddenly I'll realize, wait a minute, this thing was actually from like a sci-fi show I watched years ago, like an episode of Lost in Space or something, and so I can't use that. Got to redirect. But I know that people sometimes said that my first book, Operation Red Dragon, seemed a little too similar to the recent MonsterVerse movies, and like there was inspiration there, but I did my level best not to just copy what was in the movie. So, and if it were ever made visual, I think that would definitively prove that. At least I hope it would. But yeah, you always got to be careful. But then again, there's nothing new under the sun, right? And everything inspires everything else.
Yeah, and sometimes you do homages, things that, like when I wrote that Western Frankenstein novel I was mentioning before, I purposely put in situations that in Western movies were cliches, but in a horror story they were brand new, but I mean, busting on the jails and shootouts and all that sort of thing. You know, you see that in a horror novel. It's wow, and especially if you're not into westerns.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, horror westerns you don't generally see. There's one I keep seeing recommended on streaming. I've been meaning to check out. Curse of the Undead. That's a vampire western.
Yeah.
You seen that one?
Yeah, I love that movie.
Okay,
really
so now I'm really looking forward to it.
And it's unusual because it was made at a time that in the U.S. they weren't really making Gothic type horror films. They were still making. It was Hammer that was making the Gothic type movies, but they were still making westerns, and this combined the two. You know, and I enjoyed that movie very much.
Yeah, I mean, but I think western's one of those genres you could potentially combine with everything, because you got Curse of the Undead with a vampire, got Beast of Hollow Mountain and Valley of Gwangi with dinosaurs.
Well, westerns in themselves aren't really original because they're really basically old-fashioned morality plays.
Yeah,
just in a western setting. You know, good versus evil, and good triumphs over evil, and
exactly.
I mean, that's Dracula's like that.
Yeah, unless it's one of those deconstructionist westerns that they make these days, but
I don't like those.
Yeah,
I don't like westerns where everything looks brown, you know, and all the characters talk like Strother Martin. It's like, well, we're gonna do this, yeah, and they all wear derby hats, and everybody looks like they smell bad, you know. And I like. Buck Jones or something. The Three Musketeers.
Yep. Although that said, Blazing Saddles is still good.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. What's the scariest dinosaur-related film you've ever seen? And P.S. Happy Halloween. Happy Halloween to you as well.
George Forey would say Harpy Horrorween. And he would call this a podcast. Anyway, I don't think I've ever been scared by a dinosaur movie. I mean, I just thought dinosaurs were cool. I do remember when I saw The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. I saw that in a drive-in. When it first came out. First went to neighborhoods and after it played downtown in Chicago. So we saw it at a drive-in on a double bill with Young Bess. Now, Young Bess at the time was the longest movie ever made, as far as I was concerned, and they ran it first. So I had to sit through Young Bess before we got to The Beast from 2000 Fathoms. And the sound on Beast was really loud. Either maybe we had the little speakers in the car turned up too loud. I don't know. But I remember every time that Beast really roared, I kind of jumped, you know. So on the way home from that theater, that drive-in, I was expecting at any moment that big Rhedosaurus head to come looking over a building and to eat me. But that was about the only time I ever had an effect like that. But ever since then, dinosaur movies are just kind of neat, you know.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of that question myself. I wouldn't necessarily say I've ever seen something dinosaur related that was scary, but I do know that the closest I've ever seen dinosaurs get to horror in something like film or animation would be the animated series Primeval, because there are a couple of episodes that have you seen Primeval?
No, we're talking. Oh, the Primeval was the other one, right?
Yeah, Primeval was the British show. Primeval.
I haven't seen either.
Primal's an animated project, and it's interesting because it's told pretty much entirely without dialogue, or if there is dialogue, it's not in English. That basic premise, again, kind of a throwback to the pulps. It's this burly caveman named Spear and a T-Rex named Fang. Spear recently lost his family. Fang recently lost her hatchlings, and they basically decided they're going to wander the prehistoric landscape and find some way to find peace, a new tribe of some sort. Trick is, everything in this world wants to kill them. It can get pretty violent at times, so it's not for the faint of heart, but there are a couple of episodes, like one where they're being stalked by this creature that they can't see, because it moves lightning fast and only hunts at night. But they always come across what it leaves behind. It seems to just kill without actually eating what it kills. And another episode where a sauropod gets infected by this zombie virus, and it starts chasing after them, and you can tell this thing is in such agony as its body is decaying while it's still alive, and it's just very disturbing. I don't necessarily know if it's scary, but it's unsettling, to be sure.
See, one thing, maybe you can clue me in on it. I don't know if I really understand what people mean when they say it was a scary movie or scary this. Do they mean within the context of the movie? I mean, scaring other characters, or are they, as an observer at home or in the theater, actually scared? You know, like you would be if you were walking down an alley and somebody pulled a knife on you or something.
I mean, I guess it's hard to understand that mindset when. Sorry.
I can't imagine a movie doing that to somebody. I mean, to me, you were just looking at. It's like looking at a painting that's moving around or something. Yeah, I don't see how it's something on the screen, a scary looking face or whatever, a dead body, because it's actors, it's makeup and special effects. Maybe I'm just different. Maybe I'm weird. I don't know.
I think when you're a person who actually writes horror, it's and you're actually living in that world, it's difficult to understand. You get to a point where you understand it, and you don't necessarily understand how someone else could be scared by it.
Well, even I will, long before I became a professional anything, when I was like, 12 years old or something, I'd long not been scared by movies or dark rides or anything anymore. All that stuff was just fun. It was entertainment. And then, but what struck me, I went to a friend's house, about 20 years ago, and all adults were there, and we were watching Dead of Night, which we'd all seen 5 or 6 times, and we're watching this projected in a room during the daytime, so the room wasn't completely dark, getting to a scene that they knew what was coming because they'd seen the movie so many times before, and it was just this segment with the mirror where they look in the mirror, they see another room in the mirror, and everybody's getting tense up, like, oh, it's coming. What are they scared? What? I mean, I couldn't understand it. And we started talking, and the Hammer films scared them. The Universals. I had a friend who told me when he was a kid, he was older than me by about 5 or 6, 7 years, that he saw a serial that Universal made, a Western called Overland Mail. And the hero in it was played by Lon Chaney Jr. And he got afraid watching the Western serial because he was afraid that at any moment Lon Chaney was going to turn into the Wolfman. I just don't understand this. It's beyond me. It's foreign to me. And
I know that when I was younger, just seeing a still image of Christopher Lee from Horror of Dracula, where he's got the contacts in to give him the bulging red eyes, that just seeing that out of context sort of was like, whoa, that's freaky. But
out of context,
although, like, for some reason, when I was younger, and I would like look through books of different things, if there was a picture of a statue, like a classical art statue, Greco-Roman style, but the eyes weren't detailed, they were just solid blank orbs, that freaked me out. Because the eye's the window to the soul. They have no eyes. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there clearly are people out there who do get scared by these things. I guess it just depends. The last time I saw a movie that actually like got under my skin was a movie called The Nightmare. It's a documentary about sleep paralysis. You know sleep paralysis, right? Well, and it was interviewing people who go through it, and it was recreating their stuff. And I gotta admit, they did a pretty effective job. And I made the mistake of watching it before I went to bed, and I had sleep paralysis that night. So, thankfully, I don't have it chronically like they do in the movie. But yeah, that's the only time that's the only time recently I can say that I watched one of these movies and actually got scared. But then again, it was a documentary; it wasn't fiction. So,
well, the reason those three movies that I mentioned before, Night of the Living Dead, Psycho, and The Exorcist scared me. First of all, I was seeing them all on a big theater screen first run. No commercials on a TV, no interruptions, no light in the room, I didn't know what to expect in any of them. I remember going to see Psycho, and I had walked to the theater, and it was a long walk. And, I walking home, and I felt weird the whole walk home. And the Night of the Living Dead, I had no idea what that was about, and I'd seen zombie movies and things before. But the thing about Night of the Living Dead was, it never lets up. It's there's no scene where everything just kind of mellows out, or comic relief or something. I mean, even the slow talking parts they're very tense. And same with The Exorcist. And I had no idea what to expect from The Exorcist. And one of the things that was the scariest thing about The Exorcist to me was when Linda Blair is in the hospital and she's got the tube and the liquids coming out. I mean, that freaked me out. And to me, what scares me is when I'm sitting in the dentist chair and the dentist says, "Oh, we found something, an anomaly. You're going to have to come back for this." And they describe some kind of procedure I've never heard of before. The week or two before going back to the dentist, wondering what they're going to do. And I have no tolerance for pain whatsoever. Not knowing what the ordeal is, I mean, that's scary to me.
Yeah.
But not movies, really.
You reminded me of Daffy Duck's quote from that abominable Snow Rabbit. "I don't like pain. It hurts me." What other questions have we got here? Do you think Bela Lugosi was a poor casting choice for the monster in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman because he was supposed to play more intelligent because he got a new brain but cut his voice?
Question, but I'll tell you, when I first saw Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, the only Frankenstein movies I'd seen before that were the two house pictures with Glenn Strange. And I went to see a local theater, the Biograph Theater, where Dillinger was shot in the alley. That theater was running a triple bill of Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, Man-Made Monster, which was then under the reissue title of Atomic Monster, and Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. And that title just jumped out at me. Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. What a great title for a movie. And the Biograph only charged like 25 cents to get in. So it was at a matinee. I was there with a friend of mine. We were standing in line. There was a long line. And my part of the line happened to be right where the lobby cards were being shown in the window. And they showed a couple of shots of Bela Lugosi as the monster. And I thought, that doesn't look like the monster. Because I remember Glenn Strange. I said, he looks weak. He doesn't look strong. There's something wrong with him. I didn't know he was Lugosi at the time. And so I was disappointed in the way he looked and the way he kind of acted. I didn't know about the blindness or anything like that, or the dialogue, or anything like that. I think, of course, he was chosen because he was supposed to speak, and they had continuity with the movie before that, Ghost of Frankenstein, where they used his voice as Igor. But yeah, I thought he was a poor choice. I wish Glenn Strange would have been in that one. That would be great. Or even, originally they wanted to have Chaney play both parts, and when they realized how impractical that was, Uh, they canned that idea, but their posters showing that.
Mm. Yeah, the poster for that movie is great with them like each about to strike each other.
Yeah, well, that was a painting. I mean, that was but the photo in the lobby cards, he looked kind of. He just looked. He didn't look menacing. He just looked. I don't know. I didn't really know what Bela Lugosi looked like at the time. I didn't make that connection. I just knew he didn't look like the monster I'd seen in the other two movies.
Yeah, he does look drastically different because Lugosi's got a very distinct face even with all that makeup. Let's see. Omni has been talking facts about werewolves as of late. So, Don, what are your favorite werewolf movies and stories, your own or otherwise? Also, as a writing question, how do you handle flashbacks? You've actually written an entire book about real werewolves, so this will be an interesting answer.
Yeah, I made a movie called Dances with Werewolves.
Great title.
True Werewolves of History. And I have a werewolf character that turns up in my Frankenstein novels now and then. How do I write my favorite werewolf movie is I love all the Lon Chaney Wolfman movies. I really like Werewolf of London. I like Curse of the Werewolf, except the ending, I think, is kind of like they didn't know what to do with him. So they just had the werewolf walking around on top of the buildings, and then he never changes back to human form. There's so many werewolf movies now, it's hard to really.
Did you see the 2010 remake of The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins?
Yeah, I didn't particularly like that. It was it didn't have the warmth or the characterization of the Chaney version. It had some nice scenes in it, but now they're remaking it again, I hear.
And what the comment was referring to is they revealed what the makeup looks like, and it does not look like a Wolfman.
No, they're always like out in the backyard or something. It looks like an amateur movie that I would have made when I was a teenager. But the question about flashbacks.
Yeah.
How do I write a flashback? I mean, I don't really know what you're asking me. I mean,
there was a clarification, or memories. Flashbacks are memories, just like a character remembering something.
Every writer will do it their own way. You can just say and then Bill remembered. He remembered 40 years ago when he was still in school and the nun hit him with a ruler or something, something like that. Or you can do the whole thing in italics and just make it the same tense and everything that the rest of the book was. There's there's all kinds of ways. You can even do a different typeface, different size type. In comic books, I usually maybe the panels will all have some kind of instead of being straight line panels, maybe kind of wavery a little bit, or maybe I'll have the character's face in the first panel, remembering, or do it all in quotation marks. I mean, there's no set rule. Everybody has their own way, and it's been done. Sometimes they change the tense. Sometimes the novel is written in present tense, and the flashback is in past tense. I mean, I've seen it countless different ways. So there's no real set way of doing it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some book on grammar or creative writing that has a rule for it, but I've never seen it.
I guess it just depends on how it fits in. So I guess as long as it flows naturally and you can tell when something is meant to be a flashback or a memory versus when it's happening in the here and now, that's the key thing. I remember there was an episode, not one episode. There was a recent Godzilla anime called Godzilla Singular Point that happened on Netflix. I don't know if you knew that or not. There was, as it goes along, it's a really weird take on Godzilla. Like, I would say it's actually more Cthulhu mythos than Godzilla in a lot of ways. But there's this one moment where an episode ends and it seems like a major character has just been killed by a flock of rodans, and then it goes to the credits, start the next episode. You see that character alive with the character who it looked like witnessed that character died, and they're having a conversation. Then you cut to later, that character, well, one of the characters is in the airport. It seemed like the character survived. We had no clue that the way the episode opens was a flashback that was being remembered by the surviving character. So as I was doing episode by episode reviews of it, I was like, okay, so I guess this character's alive. No, wait a minute, she's dead. Never mind. It was so confusing. And that's
is this animation?
Yeah. And like I said, it's a very weird version of Godzilla. Like, I don't even know how I would describe it without giving too much away. Like I said, more Cthulhu mythos than Godzilla, if you ask me. But yeah, it was one of those weird. The whole thing is actually confusing. Even the writer has admitted that he got kind of confused by all the technobabble they were saying by the end of it. But yeah, so my advice, I guess, would be, if you're going to write a flashback, don't do it like that.
Yeah, well, some film noir movies, I saw one, I can't remember which one it was, but it had like a flashback within a flashback. And that can get really confusing, as long as you know it's a flashback, because sometimes I've seen things, I've seen movies, I can't think of any particular title, where you're in the flashback, but you don't know it's a flashback, and you just wait, how this character was just killed or something, and what's going on here,
Yeah.
So I like to know it's a flashback.
If it's something like 12 Monkeys, where you don't know if the character is supposed to be insane or not,
I like that. That was real clever. But
yeah,
no,
something like that would be good.
A regular, realistic drama, not a fantasy or a science fiction or something.
Yeah, and I also remember there's this one rather infamous Batman comic where every couple of pages they're saying 10 hours ago, 3 days ago, 5 minutes ago, and they're never specifying 3 days, 5 months, 10 minutes from when. What time is it? So,
well, yeah. I assume everything I'm watching, unless it's a specific period thing, like a medieval story or Old West or something, or prehistoric, that it's set at the time I'm watching. I mean, it's set in the time I'm watching it. Unless they make a specific effort to show you that it's some other earlier or future time. Like when science fiction movies that say the near future, what is that?
The year 2000 double X or something.
That's so they can have some kind of a fantastic thing without going to the expense of period costumes and everything. They can keep everything else looking the same, save some money, but they can have the ray gun or the rocket ship.
Yep. Or what about, like, well, I guess since we're talking about that sort of thing, what about something that's just sort of a mixture of anachronisms, where it's like the aesthetic is 40s, but the technology is now, and people are using, and yet some people use bows and arrows and things like that, where they just sort of mix it up where you don't know what time it's supposed to be. Could be past, could be future, could be now.
If I know, and I don't usually bother, checking these things out, but if it's something that I know hits me in the face, it gets me, I won't say angry, but for example, I'll give you two examples. One is in the movie The Man from the Alamo. It's a Western set at the last days of the Alamo. Glenn Ford gets out, he's got to give a message to somebody. So he rides away from the Alamo, and on the ride away from the Alamo, he confronts these bandits, and they hold him up, and everybody's got regular, like Navy Colt revolvers. Well, they didn't have that at the Alamo. They weren't invented yet. So where do they Where did he get that? Okay, that's one thing that really bothers me to this day. Another thing, this is going to sound real trivial. I even pointed this out to one of the stars of the movie, and he didn't know it. The movie A Christmas Story, where the kid's going to get the BB gun.
Mm-hmm.
They go to a Christmas parade in town, and all these Disney characters come in. And Mickey Mouse is there, Minnie Mouse is there. And they're wearing the costumes from the theme park from the 1960s. That's a continuity error. Anyway, so those kind of things bother me. Now, but sometimes it can be used for funny effect. There's a Three Stooges short called Mummy's Dummies. I think it's Mummy's Dummies. And they have a chariot. They're riding around in a chariot set in ancient Egypt. And he gets a flat tire. So that was kind of funny. I saw that on the So anyway.
Or like the Marx Brothers line, this is the early 1800s. The telephone hasn't been invented yet.
Yeah. I mean, that's something where they're making a special joke on it.
Yeah.
But where you're not supposed to notice, that's a different story.
Well, but what if it's like they're deliberately mixing it up, not because they got the facts wrong or they're trying to make a joke, but they're just sort of trying to create a timeless thing. Like, I guess the first thing that would come to mind would be the Tim Burton Batman movie, where it looks like it could take place in the 1940s based on how characters dress, the architecture, and things like that. Or Dick Tracy. But like in the Batman movie, the technology level is clearly 1989, and the music they play and whatnot. So, like, if they're doing that sort of mix, what do you think of that?
Well, it's also Gotham was sort of portrayed as a city unto its own. The crime level and everything was dark, and it was, like it was like certain. I grew up in Chicago, and certain things. I remember when I moved, decades after I left Chicago, it was still set in the 1950s. The hairstyles and the women's clothes and all that. You didn't see very many. Into the 1970s, you didn't see a lot of long hair on guys or mini skirts on women. It was still guys playing rock and roll bands with greasy pompadours. Anyway, that's another story. What were we talking? I just lost track.
Just the idea of like intentionally making something.
Oh yeah, these timeless, like in the Universal Frankenstein movies.
Yeah, kind of like that.
Those are all set the year the movie was shot. But in some ways they look like they were shot in the turn of the century. With people riding in wagons and things like that. But they had telephones and. All that.
But then, of course, as they move on with the sequels, they say, "Oh, the events of Dracula and Frankenstein took place way back in Victorian times."
Yeah. But you look at Son of Frankenstein, there's a car in there, a 1939 car.
Mm-hmm. And enough time has passed that it has to have taken place in the past.
Yeah.
And then you have weird stuff like those Karis mummy movies where if you take the amount of time they say passes between each one, the last movie is in 91 or something.
That last one's set in the future. But, the Universal, like Frankenstein movies, most of them were made in the 1940s during World War II in basically Germany. They set in Germany. Where are the Nazis? Where are the soldiers? No mention of the war. So they created these kind of timeless... what is it, Rusitarian? There's a word for that, where these timeless hamlets where they have guys with swords and things, Prisoner of Zenda and that kind of thing. It's sort of like that, or like Flash Gordon. They're flying around in rocket ships, but they're having sword fights.
Yep, same deal in John Carter of Mars. They have flying craft, atmosphere plants, but good old-fashioned sword fights when determine the fate of the Red Planet. Yeah,
but you can give Burroughs a little bit more latitude because he was writing those stories a lot earlier than Alex Raymond was writing doing Flash Gordon, or they were making those serials.
Yeah, You could, I mean, Burroughs basically inspired everyone that came after him, right? It was Flash Gordon, Superman, all those guys. You can kind of trace back to them.
Yeah, or westerns. You
Yeah.
know, when they made the first westerns, the West was still like that. Or the first Sherlock Holmes movies, The Silence. You know, that was when the stories were being written. But as time went by, or Tarzan, and as time went by and those characters remained popular, they didn't update the environments along with them. You know, so you would see like a Gene Autry picture or a Roy Rogers movie or something, and they'd be driving cars and flying airplanes, whilst outlaws were still holding up the stagecoach in the same movie.
Yeah. Yeah, there's actually a serial, Zorro Returns, I think, that's Zorro in the modern day, and he's still doing that old-fashioned...
Yeah.
Well, modern day for the 30s, 40s era, I should specify. But, yeah, but, you know, mixing and matching can be fun, right? That was a weird tangent for us to go on, I think, wasn't it? Let's see. Got another question in here. What do you think of Mel Brooks's films like Robin Hood Men in Tights and Spaceballs?
Well, I think Mel Brooks is always funny, but he was never as funny to me as in Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein. Those are his two peaks.
Oh, yeah.
And I was lucky to see him work. And, you know, I was on the set of, I was at the studio when they were shooting Young Frankenstein for a full day. Met all the actors, got autographs, got a free lunch, and, you know, got to see Peter Boyle being made up by Bill Tuttle in the makeup room. And it was a great day. And Blazing Saddles is some outrageous. I mean, you could never make a movie like that today. I don't know if Mel Brooks could ever make a movie.
Yeah.
He's, you know, his brand of humor isn't looked upon too fondly anymore.
Yeah.
But I love Mel Brooks, and he invited me to. There's a legendary screening he had of Young Frankenstein, and I got invited to that. And everybody at the screening, they were supposed to, when they got home, to write him a letter and tell him what he should do with the movie. Because he got up there on the stage with Gene Wilder and he said, "What you're about to see is a 2-hour turkey, but buried within this movie is a 90-minute masterpiece. I want you to tell me what I should cut out of it. Go home and tell me after you see it." And I did. And I still have the letter of him saying, "No, I don't agree with you." But thanks, you know, for the contribution. And he was so generous to me. He gave me stills and he wrote a big article in Famous Monsters. And at the time, I was an associate editor of the Marvel magazine, Modern Monsters of the Movies. And I was supposed to write my experience and whatever I could about the movie for Monsters of the Movies. And I told Forey Ackerman, and I said, "I got to tell you, I got to write this for your competitor." Well, he contacted Jim Warren, and like a Saturday morning, the phone rings. I'm still in bed, and it's Jim Warren on the phone. You know, you owe Forey a lot, you owe me a lot, yeah, blah, 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 blah. How much? I will pay you way more you'll ever get at Famous Monsters. Monsters of the Movies. So I acquiesced, as we say, and I wrote the article. It was a long article for Famous Monsters, and Mel Brooks provided all the photos, anything I wanted, and unfortunately didn't make the cover. The Exorcist made the cover. They were the same year, and but anybody wants to read my experience on the lot that day and meeting everybody, get that issue.
I actually just read Mel Brooks's autobiography / memoir entitled All About Me. I remember him mentioning that screening of Young Frankenstein, and now I know you were there.
Yeah.
So, I would actually recommend reading that to anyone. It's it's one of the best written autobiography things ever, because it's written like he talks, so endlessly entertaining.
Yeah, I wanted to get him to do a cameo in my movie Tales of Frankenstein, because somebody who I knew very well was a close friend of his, and he was just too old, and
Yeah,
it would have been a bit of hardship for him.
yeah. What about what about the Broadway show, The Producers? You
I don't remember that. I don't remember that. I don't remember Spaceballs. I don't remember. I mean, I remember certain scenes from it, shots from it, but as a whole movie, I don't remember. I only saw them once, and I guess people that do remember it consider The Producers another masterpiece of his. Men in Time, I don't. All I know that an ex-girlfriend of mine was playing. I think was she or no? Never mind. I think that was a television show that she was Maid Marian. Anyway, so I don't remember that movie too much. The ones I remember most are Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles.
Yeah. Well, I was actually referring to the Broadway version, the play. But I mean, you'd have to actually go to Broadway to see it.
Yeah. I saw the Broadway version of Young Frankenstein, I think on YouTube. Somebody videotaped it. And it was, it made changes here and there, but it was okay.
Yeah. It didn't do as well as The Producers, from what I heard. But, let's see. Have you heard of 1997 horror monster movie The Relic, based on the novel of the same name with the absence of the word missing? Takes place at AMNH in the book, while movie location was changed to the FMNH.
Yes. I haven't read the book. I've seen the movie. I think there's several movies, right?
I know there's at least the one, the 97 one.
And I recognize the FMNH, the Field Museum, immediately, because I love that museum. I grew up in that museum. I used to be a volunteer at that museum. And I know every inch of that. I know the back rooms. I know the storage rooms. I know where the big bone room is, where they put the oversized dinosaur bones that they don't have on exhibit. I've been up in the labs. It's I love that museum. It's so, even though I'm in Los Angeles now, it's still my favorite museum for all kinds, not just the dinosaurs, but there's so many other things that are wonderful about that museum.
So I'm sure watching The Relic, you would have been all attuned to, like, if they got a location wrong of how you get to one room or something. Were they accurate?
Yeah, I don't really, it's been a while since I've seen it. I'd have to see it again. Sometimes, they would, I don't know about that movie in particular, but in some movies they would get the establishing shot walking through the main corridor and go into a room and suddenly they're on a sound stage in this movie studio,
Yeah.
The Omen 2, part of it was shot at the Field Museum in Chicago. There was a number of movies that were shot there over the years. And just like our Los Angeles museum here, I don't recall anything offhand that was shot at the American Museum in New York, the one you mentioned, the AMNH. I guess it depends, where the bulk of the movie shot and how much it would cost to relocate and what the museum is charging.
Yeah. Of course, I know you've shot in museums a couple of times.
Yeah, that was done as it wasn't a student film, but we for some reason it just let us do it. I shot some video stuff there, and inside and outside. They were real nice about that.
I can imagine. I'm trying to think of like why they wouldn't use the New York one, but like, I don't know. Guess it's just preference.
Well, the movie, I don't remember where the rest of it was shot. If it was shot in Chicago, it would be silly to go to New York, bring all the equipment or hire a new crew and all that, and bring put up the actors and everything, in another state.
Yeah.
You take advantage of what's at your disposal, where you happen to be at a certain point in time.
Yeah. Let's see. Looks like we have officially crossed the 2-hour mark about 4 minutes ago. And I didn't want to keep you here too long because
I'm fine.
all right.
It's only 8 o'clock here in California.
All right. Well, let's see. Trying to think of other. I did mention you've written some nonfiction about stuff like the True Werewolves of History, Dracula book, Frankenstein book. What insights can you give us into writing those things?
Well, in every one of those cases, I think there were books I wanted to read. Nobody had written them yet. And I knew if I waited for somebody to write them, it would probably not do a really great job because they would leave things out and they wouldn't do the research, and I would get all angry. So the best thing to do would be to write them myself. And that's how the great movie serials came about and the great television heroes. And I've written a lot of dinosaur books, a lot of children's books, a lot of books I didn't get my name on, but I've written a good percentage of the nonfiction books I wrote were about dinosaurs. And then I did some things with Western Publishing Company on monsters in general. One was just called Monsters, and it had, it covered all the monsters and had games and puzzles and things inside, activities. And I love doing research. And, I wrote those books before we had an internet. So the research was going to the library and looking things up and going through card catalogs and all that sort of thing. Now you can find anything on the internet pretty much. And it's a lot easier. Yeah. But I don't really want to write any more of those books. They take up an awful lot of, even with the internet, they take up an awful long time and they don't really sell great. My dinosaur books have done very well, but everybody loves dinosaurs. But not everybody loves old television programs or old movie serials or things like that. So I don't want to. One of the mistakes I made in the past, I spread myself too thin. Tried doing too many things, not concentrating on any specific area. And now if I had the money, I'd make another movie tomorrow. But my main activities is my involvement with the Warrant Publishing Company. I'm the associate editor of both Vampirus Carmilla and Shutter magazines. I also write stories for them, and working on my various websites. They both take up a lot of time. I used to do a lot of lecturing too, lecturing on dinosaur movies. I went all over the world doing that with film clips and everything. And but I was doing too many things, and I wish I could spend more time with my music, but that's really where my main love is. So I don't know if that answered the question, but
no, yeah, I think it answered way more than the simple question I initially asked, really. But so your main love is music. You keep bringing that up. I think if memory serves, in our first live stream, you actually introduced yourself as a musician first. So,
yes.
Well, so have you ever decided to just sort of record another album of some sort? Maybe not necessarily a full produced one, but something a bit.
I haven't seriously thought about it. I would love. If the opportunity came my way, I would sure do it. I'm kind of out of practice on a lot of things, I love to get together with people on unfortunately, 2 rare occasions to play, jam with people. But, what I really wanted years ago, I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be like a teenage idol. That was the kind of thing I wanted, with the girls screaming and everything, and being on the Ed Sullivan Show and all that. And I'm way beyond that. I don't know if I could come up with any more dinosaur songs,
Do acoustic versions, Dinosaurs tracks unplugged or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I wrote. We have 36 songs in there. I wrote all of them but one. My partner Pete Von Schally wrote the other one, and Dinosaur Circus. But I don't know. I don't want to go back to playing in nightclubs and for bar mitzvahs and birthday parties and weddings and things like that. And the music business has always been really tough.
Yeah.
The closest I ever became fulfilling my original dream of being a rock star was when I was in the Penny Arcade, and our producer was Mike Nesmith, who was one of the Monkees. So we had ins at we played at all the studio parties, and we had ins with the record companies, and we had rock stars hanging around our recording sessions, and I mean, we had, a lot of girlfriends and all that kind of thing. It was one of the greatest periods of my life. But that, most of those people are all dead now. I'm too old to be doing something like that. And I mean, I can't picture myself playing in some wedding someplace, being a house band at a nightclub or something like that. But I do miss those times tremendously, And unless you've experienced it, playing in clubs and rehearsing in garages and things like that, you never can explain to somebody what that was like. And anybody who was a musician knows exactly what I'm talking about. And it's something you never get out of your system. It's always there.
Yeah, that I can sort of relate, not because I was ever a musician, but I did do a lot of stage acting in my younger days, and it's different kind of performing, but
I said you're always an actor.
Yep. But hey, you never know. I mean, from what I understand, you're never too old to rock and roll. And
no, you're too old when you say it's too loud.
Well, you never know. I mean, like, I know that Blue Oyster Cult found some pretty good success with their last two new albums. Yeah, and like they were an obscure band.
Who would you say?
Blue Oyster Cult. Don't Fear the Reaper, Burning for You, Godzilla.
Oh, I know. I get great pleasure out of watching old rock and roll acts on YouTube.
Yeah.
Especially when they're really playing, they're not lip syncing.
Yeah.
And really fond of old Rolling Stones. I mean, when Brian was still with them, the original Rolling Stones, anything live with Rolling Stones, I keep finding new things, new performances and things, or Jimi Hendrix, or Roy Orbison, or the Kinks. I'm becoming a big Kinks fan, more so than I was when they were, back in the 60s. And and thankfully, somebody had the foresight of recording a lot of their performances and putting them on YouTube. And sometimes there's nothing to do at night. I'll be searching around YouTube and I'll find one of these performances. It's great to listen to and watch before I go to sleep.
But you've really never heard of Blue Oyster Cult?
Oh, Blue Oyster Cult. Yes, I didn't hear. Yeah.
Oh, sorry if I didn't say it clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they recently had success with a new album and an album of almost lost to time tracks that they polished up. And I got to see them live. So
yeah, I saw a cartoon on Facebook somebody posted, and it was Godzilla, I think, with like headphones or something. In the studio, I'm recording my new album. My new song is called Blue Oyster Cult. My new album, Blue Oyster Cult.
Yeah, I've seen that one floating around. And of course, we finally got that song Godzilla in an actual Godzilla movie, the American one, but still. Different version, very different, but you'll always have the original.
Yeah. I met a girl once, very pretty Japanese girl. And we were sitting around, we were here at my house, and we were sitting around talking, and she spoke broken English. And I was trying to impress her by throwing a lot of Japanese words I knew in movies. I mentioned Godzilla. And she said, my uncle wrote music for Godzilla. And I said, your uncle what's his name? Ifukubi, how do you pronounce his name?
Yeah. Akira Ifukube, I believe.
Yeah. She said, yeah, and that was her last name. And so I went to my shelf and I pulled out the album and I showed it. She says, yeah. And so that was kind of cool.
My word. You actually met the niece of Akira Ifukube.
Yeah.
Huh.
But I met Haruo Nakajima too a couple of times.
Yeah.
I did a panel once at the G Fest where I got that award. I mentioned the panel was him, his daughter who translated, me, and the guy who looks like an action figure in Godzilla Final Wars, the big guy, what's his name?
The American guy? Yeah.
Yeah, him. That was kind of neat.
That sounds like quite a lineup.
It was.
And you got to, did you do much interacting with them off the panel, or was it just go on panel together?
It was mostly on the panel, and then I met him at a Monster Palooza, and I got to talk to him a little bit more, but he didn't speak English, so it was a little bit difficult. I got him to autograph a couple photos for me, including the green gargantua. I mean, how many people have an autograph? Got a picture of that, and a very nice guy and a very nice man. Not very big, not very tall.
Yeah.
His daughter was nice and polite and sweet and everything.
I almost got a chance to meet Akira Takarada, the guy who was in so many of those early ones.
I met him too at a G Fest that they had out here in Hollywood. They usually had them in Chicago or a suburb of Chicago, and I had my class reunion at that same hotel. But they had one out here at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, and I went to that, and because that wasn't far from my house. But I enjoy those. I've been to a few of the G Fests, and they're real family affairs. At least when I went. I mean, there's the old guy with his kids, and they all love Godzilla and those kinds of movies. It was a real kind of shared experience.
Yeah, they're still pretty good. I went this past summer. It was quite an experience. Everybody just really liked being there. And of course, when you go to the Pickwick Theater to watch the movies on the big screen in that Art Deco setting, that's something else.
Are they still having them in Illinois there in Chicago?
Yep.
Yeah. Hotel for it,
Yeah, drop on by next time, maybe.
Well, I'm not in Chicago now. I'm in California.
Well, I'm in Maine, so just about making the trip sometimes. Let's see. I think we got another.
With the last one I was at, I had a table there, and the guy came up to my table, and I recognized him, and he's there with his kid, and he said, "Hi, Don. I'm Greg Nicotero." Now, Greg Nicotero, one of the great makeup, special effects guys like Rick Baker. And I said, "What are you doing here at a Godzilla convention?" And he said, "My son loves Godzilla." And here, so.
Yeah. I remember I was actually in this last one that I briefly spoke to a guy who is officially remastering the Ultraman, the animated Ultraman pilot that Hanna-Barbera made in the 80s for a Blu-ray release sometime next year. Did you ever see that one? Like, they made a pilot. It was supposed to be a series.
I don't remember. I think they ran it on TV here. Is that the one Jeff Spiegel wrote? You know,
it might be. It's the one where three people get the ultra powers.
I can't remember.
They have a base behind.
All I remember is a scene when I think they were like in a airplane, like a 747 or something. Is that the one we're talking about?
Might be. That they have a base behind Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
Apparently the rights to it recently got cleared up, although the only way they will be able to release it in America was that they had to redo all of the voice acting.
Oh. You know, I was hired, I don't know if you know this, but I was back around 1980. I was hired by Subaraya Productions to write a American Ultraman movie, feature-length movie, which I wrote the script. I paid him for the script. We were starting to cast it. I remember, based on my suggestions, the producer was going to use, wanted to use Jackson Bostwick, who played Captain Marvel in the first season of Shazam, and Annie Lockhart, who went on to do Battlestar Galactica, as the two leads. And then it was all set in the United States. And I put one Japanese character, and they made me take it out. They didn't want anything looking Japanese in it. They wanted it to look like an American movie. And then they ran out of money, and they never made the movie. I remember. It was called Ultraman Hero from the Stars.
I remember reading about that, yeah.
And on a couple of my websites, I have a page devoted to that, including some preliminary artwork that Alex Wald, who was a friend of mine in Chicago who loved those Japanese movies and who was also an artist, did and submitted for the three monsters. There were more than three monsters. There was, and also the Ultraman character, the new Ultraman. And unfortunately, never got made. I mean, that was a fun. You can't imagine how fun it is for a writer who loves movies like that to be writing scenes of mass destruction with giant monsters fighting it out in New York using familiar landmarks like the Statue of Liberty and.
Yep. Yeah, I've been writing. Actually, I just wrote a new chapter of a kaiju novel I'm working on, and I must have been channeling King Kong versus Godzilla because I wrote the first major fight scene, and it takes place on the slopes of Mount Fuji, like the finale of that one. That was fun to write. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
I had a scene in there where I forgot it involved Mount Rushmore, and I forgot what actually happened. But they made me take it out because Superman 2 had just come out, and they had a scene with Mount Rushmore, and they didn't want anybody to think we were copying them.
Yeah.
But I also met. We had a meeting. The first meeting I met the girl who wrote the Ultraman theme song. You know, Ultraman is here, from the TV show, the first season. Yep. She was the girlfriend of Noboru Subaraya, who was the son of Eiji Subaraya. And I also met Paul Schreiben, who was the attorney for Subaraya at the time. Schreiben used to work with Henry Saperstein, and he was taking credit for changing the name of Godzilla to Gigantus in the second Godzilla movie, and also for changing in War of the Gargantuas, taking out all references to Frankenstein. And he was very proud of these two things. And he did them both for specific reasons, which I thought was crazy. But he was very proud of those. Are his main accomplishments. But it was strange dealing with, they had the guy who was going to do the special effects. He was there. There was Noboru Naofumi Okamoto, who was the producer, who became and still is a very good friend of mine. He moved back to Japan, but we were going to do some projects together. None of them ever really got finished, but but they were all making suggestions, and I was giving them my idea what the Ultraman movie would be about, and they would say like, what do you know about what is your feeling about who Ultraman is? And I said, well, he's a hero, and they will go, oh, he's a hero, you know, and then who would put his life on the line for his friends. Oh, they loved that, because in Japan, if you look at a lot of those, even the monster movies, there's a scene, usually in those early ones, where one character gives up his life for his friend, like in Godzilla Rage Ben, Kobayashi, that character, or even when one Rodan dies along with the other one, you know. So I made sure I had that in the script, and but they didn't understand a lot of certain things. My Ultraman script was whole based on the idea that when the asteroid hit and wiped out the dinosaurs, that some of them went underground where they mutated and became kaiju. Okay, and so the whole thing was based on this organic, earthbound premise. And then one guy would say, could we throw in a giant robot from outer space, which had nothing to do with the idea, with the concept? And I would try to explain why to them it didn't matter. It was like the visual thing that we're going for, you know. But that was a fun experience. I was glad. And they treated me like a king when they were out here. They would take me to expensive restaurants and everything, you know, nightclubs, and it was a big deal. And
I can imagine.
Yeah, I enjoyed that whole experience.
And now Ultraman's been making a comeback recently. Like, they're still making new shows. And I think what we need to do is, everybody, you guys have to be part of this. We got to start a campaign to let the current Super Raya production team know that, remind them that this exists, so that they will contact our friend Mr. Don Glut and say, hey, still interested?
Well, you know, I don't think the family owns the company anymore.
No.
I was at the American Film Market about 5 years ago, and all the Japanese companies had a room to themselves, and one of the kiosks or booths, or whatever you want to call it, was Subaraya. So I introduced myself, and it was all nice, you know, but nobody wanted to talk anything about business or anything like that. But I think, is there an Ultraman? Is there Marvel or somebody doing an Ultraman comic book now?
Yeah. Currently, there's an Ultraman Avengers crossover, and there was also an animated movie on Netflix, Ultraman Rising, which started as an homage to Ultraman, but as they were developing it, they thought, hey, why don't we actually make it officially Ultraman? And they reached out, and from what I've heard, the way they convinced the Super Eye Productions to officially give them the license and make it an Ultraman movie is they showed them this one shot, which is like the iconic shot of the movie, where Ultraman, fully transformed, this movie's Ultraman, it's sort of to the side, and he's holding in his hands this newly hatched baby kaiju. And they're backlit by the moon, and it's this moment of these two souls connecting, and that's what made them think, okay, you guys actually do get it. That you get that Ultraman is an empathic sort of character. Go for it.
Well, what I did in that movie, I remember at the time they had a whole team of Ultra characters. Ultraman Lion, and I don't remember what the names were. But
Ace, Jack, Taro, all bunch.
So I had a scene set on, what was it, M23 or something? I forgot what
M78, I think.
So yeah. Where the threat on Earth was so great that they realized they needed a super powerful, Ultraman. So they single out the guy who was going to become this character, and all the other Ultraman characters lined up, like three on this side and three on that side, or how many there were, and they all transferred their powers to him. So he could do what every one of them could do, which even included shrinking down to tiny size. And I had him fall in love with a Earth girl, Earth woman. I even had a scene. I remember a scene where they're walking down Sunset Boulevard past a theater that's running the Midnight Rocky Horror Show, and everybody's looking at him like he's weird, and he's looking at them as if they're weird, And I remember one of the battles. I don't remember the whole script or anything, but one of the battles was a sea monster. I had the three main monsters were like surrogates for Godzilla, Rodan, and Manda. One was based on land. That was the Godzilla surrogate. One flew, Rodan or Mothra, and one came out of the sea. And the one that came out of the sea was attacking New York. And Ultraman rips the Statue of Liberty off its base, and using the spikes on the crown, beats the monster back into the water and kills it. And then he takes the statue, puts it back, and using one of his powers, he shoots these rays out and it seals where he ripped it off its base. I remember that distinctly. That was, you can't imagine writing a scene like that.
Yeah. And that sounds like something that would be in the Ultra series. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you said you had the other Ultras, so it would have, that harkens back to the continuity stuff, right? Because it would have been...
I was very big at continuity back then, and I didn't want to violate anything that went on in the shows. So I had acquired a bunch of Ultraman books from Japan, a friend of mine from Japan, and I used those as reference. And sometimes it would give, the specs on what the characters could do and how big they were and all that sort of thing. And I just figured it all out, and I bought a little Ultraman figure in Little Tokyo, and I put that on my desk. I have since sold it on eBay for nice money. Anyway, I put it on my desk, and that was my inspiration. And I just sat down and wrote the script. But there was, it was funny because the producer, who became very good friends of mine, didn't understand most of American humor. So I got this phone call again, like about 2 a.m, and he's in the pen. What is this? You got an extra monster here. You mentioned an extra monster, but you don't show him. What is this? I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, see, I had one character who was jealous of another character because of a girlfriend. And somebody says, oh, it looked like the green-eyed monster is showing himself again. Well, I meant jealousy from the Shakespeare reference. Well, who is this green-eyed monster? I don't see any other green-eyed monster in the script. So I had to explain to him. I had to actually, I think, take that reference out so he wouldn't get confused. But that was kind of the thing I dealt with at the time. But it was
sense. I could actually see that like being a whole scene in a movie about making movies, that could be one of those drawn from life things. I did see a couple other questions in here. Let me see. Here's one. Do you think one of the newly discovered giant ichthyosaurs would make a good monster movie monster?
Well, the only problem with ichthyosaur. In fact, we're working on one now at the museum where I'm a volunteer at, from Nevada. I guess from the Reno area around there, Ichthyosaur State Park, and the skull is like 6-7 feet long. I mean, it's huge, and we don't know what it is yet. It could be Dinosaurs, which is up until now anyway. I think the largest ichthyosaur known it's mounted at the museum in Las Vegas, the Nevada State Museum. But I think my problem is they look kind of cute. They look kind of like dolphins.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't look real threatening, like a shark or something like that. So
Yeah.
and I don't know. They've got those really narrow snouts. I discovered a new species of ichthyosaur once.
Oh, really?
I'm not a outdoorsy guy. I mean, I need my air conditioning, so I don't go out and digs and things.
Mm-hmm.
But we had an opportunity once to go out to Orange County, where there was a Miocene. No, it wasn't. It was a dolphin. It wasn't an ichthyosaur.
Anyway,
I think it was a Miocene deposit that they were going to flood over. So a friend of mine who was a paleontologist in Orange County said, we had a local dinosaur club. You all want to go out and go on a dig? And I said, sure. I've never been on a dig before. So we all went out there, and we're all looking around, and the weathering was incredible. There were fossils. You couldn't walk anywhere without stepping on bone, So finally, I was looking around, and everyone was picking up scraps of this and that. And I saw this ravine. I said, I'm going to go look in the ravine. Maybe there's something down there. And I went down there and looked, and I saw sticking out of the ground what looked to me like an ocarina. Do you know what an ocarina? An ocarina is a musical horn with it's sort of like, it's if you ever saw the movie
small handheld, kind of like a flute, but not a candy.
There's a movie Stalag 17. A guy plays one in that movie. Anyway, it was about a prison camp. Getting off the topic. Anyway, it looked like an ocarina. So when I went down there and I extracted it from the ground, and I had either a knife with me. No, I didn't have it. I just had the thing. And look, they had these little circular things on it. But it looked like something. It didn't look like just another piece of scrap that everybody else was finding. Climbed back up the hill, and I said, does anybody know what this is? I looked like I might have found something. And the guys there, who were all mammal experts, surrounded me, grabbed them. What? And we scraped a little of the matrix on it, but that was just like mud, and you could see a little more of it. Well, he said, where did you find it? And I pointed to where I found it. And they went down there, and they sent a team out there to dig it. It turned out to be what I found was the snout of an extinct Miocene porpoise or dolphin. And what was in the ground was the rest of the skull. So when I became a volunteer, I was telling the story to a paleontologist who worked there, who was an authority on fossil whales and dolphins. And we were in the lunch where we ate lunch, and behind us were all these cabinets filled with fossils. Okay.
Yeah.
The collections, as they're called. And I told him this story, and he said, "Oh, I don't believe it." And I said, I took a picture. They took a picture of me holding this. So he said, "We bring it in next week when you come in." So I brought the picture in, and he looked at this photograph, and he went behind me, the cabinet, and he opened the cabinet, and he pulled out the reconstructed skull with my snout on the end of it. And that skull caused a controversy, I remember, because the people in Orange County, the university there, claimed they had ownership of it. And the people in Los Angeles claimed they had ownership. And it went to court, and I guess a trial. And it finally wound up in the collections in LA. So where I'm a volunteer is the fossil dolphin that I discovered. And I'm very proud of that.
So we started this. You were extracting tendons from a titanosaur, and now we're here, and you've discovered a new species.
Yeah. It might even be a new genus. I don't know. Because I'm not into fossil whales and things, and cetaceans, as they're called. I'm into dinosaurs and pterosaurs, mostly dinosaurs.
So at a certain point, you're going to have to write your memoirs, and you'll entitle it, What Haven't I Done Exactly? Because you've done so much.
Yeah, there's so much I can't talk about. So that's why you're never going to see the memoirs.
Well, I won't ask.
It would be a lie if I didn't include certain things that shaped me to what I eventually wound up becoming. So certain things I can't write about.
Let's see.
But if you go to my website, you'll find all the bio stuff you'll ever want to know about me. Or read my book, I Was a Teenage Movie Maker. That's got a lot of bio stuff in it, too.
Yep. And I have put links down in the description if anyone's curious. Let's see. This question says, when you were young, did you mistake the Gorgosaurus, now a Daspletosaurus, that used to be in the main hall of the Field Museum as a Tyrannosaurus before they got a real T-Rex with Sue?
Which is no longer in the main hall. Anyway, yes. In fact, there's one genus name that it was named in between those two names. When I was a kid, it was Gorgosaurus. And the nickname at the museum was Gorgie. Mounted it.
Gorgo was taken.
Yeah, and that was a big deal. No, Gorgo came out later. The movie came out later.
Oh.
The Gorgosaurus mount was in 1956. I remember that distinctly. And then when they moved it up, when it was still on display, I think in the main hall, Field Hall, Dale Russell wrote a paper, paleontologist Dale Russell, in which he lumped Gorgosaurus and Albertosaurus together. They said it was the same animal. And Albertosaurus, being named first, had priority. And according to the International Commission of Zoological Nomenclature, the ICZN, the name that's the oldest, the first name, is the name that has to stick. And that's why Basilosaurus, which is a whale, has a reptile name to it. So they renamed the mount in Stanley Field Hall Albertosaurus. Then when they opened their new dinosaur hall upstairs, and they moved the then Albertosaurus up there with it in a new pose, in a new modern pose. It wasn't upright anymore, it was horizontal. Somebody else wrote a paper, I think it was Greg Paul, maybe, Phil Curry, maybe, I can't remember which, that they discovered there were actually 3 different genera. They were all related to Tyrannosaurus rex, but were older and a little bit smaller. One was Gorgosaurus, which was distinct from Albertosaurus, which was distinct from the new one, Daspletosaurus. And there were certain aspects of the Field Museum skeleton that were consistent with Daspletosaurus. So that's how that particular skeleton has had 3 names since 1956.
Complicated stuff. But yeah, and I know you said like there are some names that go out of fashion and then they come back. Now people are claiming that Brontosaurus was a real dinosaur all along.
Well, that's another really interesting story. And again, there are 3 names. Well, 2 names and 1 yet to be named genera we're talking about here. They used to think that it was the original, they used to think there was a Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus. Then Elmer Riggs figured out they were the same animal, or thought they were the same animal. And because Apatosaurus had name priority, that became the name, although all the children's books and movies and comic books and things still called it Brontosaurus. Well, right before COVID, a paper came out, and I forgot who wrote it, but for a while there, they had the wrong skull on it. And for political reasons, intra-museum political reasons and egos involved, one paleontologist said, this is the correct skull, even though the real correct skull was just not too far away and almost associated with the skeleton. So he got his way, and he had his skull, which is a Camarasaurus skull. And that skull was on all the museum mounts that had Apatosaurus skeletons, except the one at Yale, the Peabody Museum, had a sculpted skull, which is the one you see on the mount in Bringing a Baby and the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and various TV shows. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the paper that came out right before COVID, they figured out there's actually 3 separate genera we're dealing with. The one in New York, the American Museum of Natural History, which finally got the correct skull put on it, is a Patasaurus. The one at Yale, which also got the correct skull put on it, which looks like a Diplodocus skull, not like a Camarasaurus skull, that's Brontosaurus. The one in Chicago at the Field Museum, which is a composite, front half and the back half, it was mounted for years, for decades, with only the back half of the animal there and half the tail missing. Now there's the whole thing. That seems to be a new genus altogether, but nobody's named it yet. Here's the tricky thing. The skeleton in New York was the basis for a famous painting by Charles R. Knight, the artist, famous artist by Charles R. Knight, which became the basis for the animal in King Kong, Son of Kong, and various other movies, still having the Camarasaurus head on it. Therefore, the dinosaur in King Kong and Son of Kong and all that is still a Patasaurus. It's not Brontosaurus. The one in Chicago, based on another famous Charles Knight painting, which became that painting got swiped by comic book artists. You can't count how many comic book artists swiped that painting. That's the unnamed one. And Brontosaurus, the one at Yale, has had the least amount of life restoration, sculptures and paintings and things. So it's still mostly a Patasaurus in the movies, folks.
There you go.
The story, the common story that went around, because people who don't understand paleontology or nomenclature and these other things, thought that they just had the wrong head on it. And the moment they switched the head, it became Brontosaurus all over across the board, which is incorrect. So there
you go. I know that last time you answered this question, but there someone did want to ask your opinion on cryptids. I do remember you asked.
The funny thing is, no, I don't believe. I don't think. I don't believe. Is it
Mbembe?
Yeah, I think either that just somebody saw something else or made up the story. The funny thing was, I was at a party once. No paleontology people there except me. Just a bunch of people at a party. And I turned around, and standing next to me is Herman Reguster, who told the story, who got all the news coverage about that. There's all kinds of reasons why one kind of dinosaur could not have survived, especially a Jurassic dinosaur, which is like tens of millions of years before the dinosaurs went extinct. How it could exist in the Congo without a balanced ecosystem, without predators, and there's all kinds of reasons. So I think it's just a preposterous story.
Although I follow a lot of cryptozoology stuff myself, and I did see somebody point out at one point that there are mysterious sounds that have been recorded in regions where Mokele Mbembe is said to be, and they don't line up with what we know elephants or other known species sound like. And I know one person compared it to there are people who've been doing sound recreations based on recovered vocal chambers and stuff of what dinosaurs would have really sounded like. And he noticed that the closest match he could find to what these mysterious alleged Mokele Mbembe sounds were like was the recreation of the Brachiosaurus sound. It's not an exact match. So there's still that idea that, maybe not necessarily a dinosaur.
Well, I don't remember reading anything about or hearing anything about a brachiosaur sound. I know hadrosaurs. There are a lot of them that have these weird hollow crests, that connect to nasal passages and everything. But I do know, just like Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and all these things, which I also think are just myths. And people, the more we advance technologically, the less mysteries we have in the world. And I think people need mystery in their life, some kind of mystery. It's just part of human nature. And these are the last mysteries yet that have yet to be solved. And when they are solved, a lot of disappointed people in the world.
Well, you never know. Like, there are weird things out there being discovered all the time. And I remember they did the eDNA tests at Loch Ness prior to the lockdowns and everything. The whole eDNA thing, I don't know if you followed what that process is. Like taking samples from Earth or water or whatever the environment is. The E stands for environment. And there's a new process where you can actually determine what creatures were there. You extract the DNA they left behind. It's a fairly new science. And when you're trying to get it from water where it degrades a bit more, it's really tricky. So when they did Loch Ness, like roughly a quarter of it couldn't be classified. They did, however, notice that there was a lot of eel DNA. And there are some more recent videos alleged to be of the Loch Ness Monster. If you look at it, it looks kind of eel-like. So,
well, maybe I just don't think it's a plesiosaur, which is what everybody wanted it to be.
No, it might not be. It might be a type of eel, or maybe it's somewhere in that DNA that wasn't specified. We really don't know at this point. But I do think that I do think that mankind needs mysteries. I also think that the mysteries of the world tend to be that there tends to be a lot more nuance to them than either it's real or it's a hoax. I mean, even like with Bigfoot, the Patterson-Gimlin film, that still has never been recreated. And yet there are people who have come forward saying I was the guy in the suit, but there's so many of them, they can't all be telling the truth.
I was a friend of the guy who said, and he showed me photos and all kinds of things, sold the suit to Patterson. And that was Phil Morris, of Morris Costume Company, formerly the horror host, TV horror host, and live spook show host, Dr. Evil. And he said it was a standard suit, and if you get a good enough clear image, you can see in one shot a reflection of a zipper on the back, I think he said.
Yeah, they've kept enhancing that video. They keep finding features that wouldn't have been on gorilla suits. So I don't know. The Patterson-Gimlin film, I think, is still kind of up in the air. I mean, there's an argument to be made that it was a guy in a suit, but there's always something about it. Like every time somebody tries to recreate it using a suit, it just doesn't look like a good match. So who knows? Maybe we'll find out one day. Maybe we won't. But like I said, I do tend to think the world has a lot more secrets hidden than it sometimes is given credit. That's just me, though, maybe. Let's see. We do have another question in here. What are your thoughts on Peter Jackson's take on Skull Island with speculative dinosaurs and other creatures? From his multi-hour version of King Kong.
Well, Peter Jackson obviously knows nothing about dinosaurs. And like those Z-Rexes, whatever they were called.
V-Rex, I think.
Yeah, V-Rexes. They were supposed to be more evolved. Well, if they were more evolved, they wouldn't have 3 claws. And other things he doesn't know how theropod dinosaurs of that type evolved and and changed over time. I thought the movie. I didn't like the movie. I thought all the things that made the original a classic in terms of story and character were missing from his version. For instance, in the original, the Beauty and the Beast theme is referred to throughout the movie to make the last line pay off. No, it was Beauty Killed the Beast.
Mm-hmm.
Jackson's movie, you don't hear anything about Beauty and the Beast until that last line, so it's meaningless. In the original, Carl Denham, the whole reason for the voyage, because Carl Denham has heard this story of this mysterious skull island with a god monster on it, or monster god on it. Yeah. In this one, they're almost at the island when Carl Denham hears about this legend. It's like he's not the one responsible for the adventure. He's just going along for the ride, and then he just happens to hear about it. I thought the actor who played Jack Driscoll was totally miscast. I thought the actor who played the actor, I forgot his name.
He was a new character.
He should have been Jack Driscoll. And I thought all the stuff with, Naomi Watts is nice to look at, but doing the cartwheels and all that sort of stuff, they were just silly. And I totally didn't buy the ending. Can you imagine a girl who's been kidnapped by this monster, taken up to the top of the then tallest building in the world, with the wind blasting and airplanes flying, creating more of a draft, machines going on, and she has a chance to get down to escape? No, she climbs up and she starts yelling, "Hey, come on, come on, come on, come on." I just don't, those are plot holes to me. And as a writer, a pet peeve of mine are plot holes.
Mm.
And when somebody points out one of my plot holes, it drives me crazy. I didn't think of that, And it's like in Jurassic Park. Two major plot holes in Jurassic Park. One is dinosaurs are related to birds. And they think they mentioned that in the movie. So why did they cross their DNA with a frog's DNA? Because they wanted them to lay the eggs and reproduce, And why did they, when they're going out in those little trams or whatever, and they get marooned on the island, why did they forget to put the locks on? Or not put locks on those doors to keep them in those trams? It was so they could get out of the trams and get into all kinds of mischief and danger. Those kind of things just drive me crazy. I couldn't got away with those when I was writing a Gold Key comics. They would point them out. If you had a hole in your story, they would say, "Oh, that would never happen. You couldn't do this. You couldn't do that." And so it's those kind of things that really. And I thought in the King Kong remake, there was just way too much special effects. Way too in the stampede and the 3 VRXs and just way too much.
Well, Peter Jackson was overindulgent.
Why, when you can create any kind of an animal with CGI or any kind of other effects, why would you replace the giant pteranodon with bats? It's like when Ray Harryhausen put a walrus in A Golden Voyage to Sinbad.
Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, actually.
Oh, yeah, Eye of the Tiger. But any kind of a monster in there that nobody's ever seen before, and you put a walrus, which you can see at the zoo.
Yeah. Walrus giganticus, but still a walrus.
Still a walrus.
Yeah. Yeah, the bats always struck me as weird, too. They're obviously like not normal bats, but I would have preferred pterosaurs of some sort. He just come off of doing the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which was a huge hit. He could basically do whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
So, but The original question was about the alternative evolution. I know you weren't too thrilled of it with King Kong, but like, what about, say, in the Dougal-Dixon Afterman or the new dinosaurs, those kind of things?
Well, that's a different thing, though. That's he. I know Dougal very well. I stayed at his house in Dorset, in the mid '80s, and he works those things out. I mean, he's a scientist too, I believe, and all those creatures are carefully worked out. You know, how would they change over time in a certain environment, in a certain place, and a certain, you know, I mean, they're fun, but they're based in something, based in some reality, based in some knowledge that he has and some facts that we already know. You know, so I like Dougal stuff.
Yeah, I used to, when I was younger, I'd go to my local library. They had a copy of the new dinosaurs there. Loved that cover art with the theropod with the huge teeth coming out. And I'd go through it. I'd be reading up on all the different species things, like dinosaurs that are this big and feed like hummingbirds, to sauropods that didn't change that much, but there's something a little different about them, and everything in between. It's crazy stuff. But yeah, again, that's like another person I've just randomly brought up, and you know him. It's
I had adventures with Dougal. He once, when I was in the UK, he took me on a drive in his car, and all along the coast. We went through all these little villages. You know, almost every village had a natural history museum or a dinosaur museum or a natural history museum with dinosaur fossils. I took so many pictures, a lot of ichthyosaurs. They had one specimen preserved while in the act, that died in the act of giving birth, and little baby coming out.
I think I've
And
seen that.
we went to Charmouth, and where Mary Anning lived, who found those fossils. And in the church, there's a little church there, right out. Her grave was right outside. I took a picture of her grave, the headstone, and everything. And the church on a stained glass window was Mary Anning's name, and then the date. You know, somebody had bought a window for her. Then we went into what was originally Mary Anning's fossil shop. Now this is where it gets weird. It's still kept up as a fossil shop. All right. And I hear over the speaker Johnny Cash singing, "Johnny Yuma was a rebel," you know, from the TV show. 2 years later, my friend Bill Warren is taking a vacation in the UK. And he happens to be in Charmouth. And he goes to Mary Ellen's shop. And over the speaker, "Johnny Yuma was a rebel." Anyway. And Dougal, timing. Yeah, Dougal was a good friend, because I had just bought a 35 millimeter camera, brand new, to take on this trip. And I wanted to go to the Isle of Wight. I've always heard of the Isle of Wight, because that's where they found, you know, megalosaurus, and I wanted to go there. I knew they had a little museum there. So I went to the museum, and before I left for the museum, for the trip, you had to take a ferry boat from where Dougal was to the Isle of Wight, and my 35 millimeter camera broke. What am I going to do? He says, "I know a camera shop. If they're open this weekend, maybe I can get them to fix it. You can take my camera," which is just a little, cheap little camera. So I took his camera. I took a bus that took me to the museum, which was upstairs from a public library. And there was a paleontologist sitting there, and he had one of my books on his shelf. I'm from the States. I wrote that book. Can I go up and, so we went up there. And he took me into the collections, and he had holotypes there. He had a holotype of what turned out to be, it's called Yaverlandia. Turned out to be the dome of a small pachycephalosaur. He let me go out in the backyard, taking these rare, unique, one-of-a-kind, priceless irreplaceable fossils out there and take pictures. I could have been some thief. I could have been some lunatic. I could have just walked off and put them, because they had you have a lantern you could put in your pocket. But they were real trusting, and they had just discovered and mounted a new theropod, which they thought might have been a species of megalosaurus, but eventually turned out to be a new theropod called Neovenator. So I got to see that. So it was a great trip. And then I missed my ferry boat. I spent too much time in the museum, and Dougal had to wait for the next ferry boat. The whole thing was an adventure. And then I went up to Wales and visited my friend Roger Dickon, who did the chest burster and Alien and the face hugger and Alien, but he also did the Dinosaurs in the Land of Time Forgot, and worked a little on Caveman, the movie. And I spent time with him, and he had the original creatures still in his garage. And Roger was a good friend of mine. He'd spent some time here in the U.S., and I met him at a screening of Planet of Dinosaurs. And he was introduced to me by Jim Danforth, who was a friend of mine. And Roger just died within the last few months. It was really a sad thing. But that was a good trip. I got to go to see the Crystal Palace dinosaurs. And that was, what an experience that was, because I got as far as the bus would take me, which was in a place called, area of London called Sydenham. And it was a big forest, a big park. And I didn't know where to, and I saw a guard there, and I said, "Do you know where the dinosaurs are?" And he said, and he pointed, "Just go that way." And as I kept walking, and finally they gradually started appearing. I saw, like, through the trees, the head of the iguanodon. Look, it was just, it was like a revelation. The closer it got, the bigger it got. And what a thing that was. And I spent the whole day there.
Good way to spend the day. I'm assuming you didn't get to have dinner inside the iguanodon like they did in the old days.
I couldn't. No, they're on an island, and you couldn't get on the island. I mean, if you made a special arrangement or something, I mean, you would have to. You literally have to either swim across. I don't know how to swim, or take a boat of some sort across. And even there was like a little cabin or something on the island which I could see, but that looked like it didn't look like there was anybody in there. It looked like it was all closed up, and maybe there were people on vacation or something. But it was great just being out there, never thinking I would see those, and there they were, and I took lots of pictures.
From what I heard, there was that, and I hope they're able to be saved, but I did hear they were recently vandalized at one point.
Yeah, I saw pictures on Facebook. I don't know how they got out there, but the megalosaurus, they like somebody snapped the whole kind of lower jaw on one side, and there's a foundation of Crystal Palace Foundation or something that has a Facebook page, and they are restoring it. Maybe it's already done. I don't know if they finished the restoration, but they were doing this. They were doing that.
Well, I hope so, because I still got to get out there and see them at some point. So
I think you just got an award or something, because we've been on, including the time where I was lost for a while. We're now on 7 minutes longer than the Rogaine Trump interview.
Oh boy.
That went 3 hours. We are now 3 hours and 7 minutes.
Take that, Joe. So I guess that's
fine. I have a good time here, and we can always come back sometime for part 3. But I mean, you don't have to kick me off or anything.
It's entirely up to you. I mean, I'm certainly starting to feel the time myself, but it's later here.
Oh yeah, that's right. Where are you again?
I'm all the way up in Maine, Dark Shadows country, Stephen King country.
You ever going to Collinsport?
Not yet, although I do live by several locations that Stephen King used in his books. So yeah, I'm still in horror territory. That makes it good for Halloween, certainly.
Yeah,
they even give tours around here.
Yeah, well, I live in Burbank, California. That's nice place.
Yeah, I visited California a few years ago. in the summer, which was a mistake. But
I think I was just running on the street now and then, but
yeah.
we all have everybody's got something.
Anyway, but if we do decide to wrap it up here, are there any parting thoughts you want to share with anyone?
Well, I hope people will check out my website. And I hope like the two magazines, Shudder and Vampiris Carmilla. I'm having a great time writing those. I'm also the associate editor, which means I'm also the proofreader. And if I spot a plot hole, I point it out to Rich Sala, the editor, and he pointed out a plot hole in one of my stories, which really destroyed me. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe I did that. But anyway, I do that, and I'm having a great time writing those stories. If anybody's followed my comic book writing career, I think these are some of the best stories I've ever written, especially best horror stories. I'm really tired of superheroes. I'm tired of writing superheroes. I'm tired of reading superheroes. I'm tired of superhero movies. I'm tired of sword and sorcery. I never liked sword and sorcery to begin with, but I've written a lot of it. I've written Dagar, Dr. Dagar, and Solomon Kane, and Cull, and a few offbeat things here and there. But they're all the same story. Everybody, I don't know why people like sword and sorcery stories, but all the artwork is the same. Some over-muscled guy that in real life could probably not even move with a sword in his hand. And either there's some girl in a flimsy outfit clutching on his leg for protection, or some warrior woman who's overly muscular and usually overweight, fighting alongside him. They're all the same and the same plots and everything. But anyway, I don't here and there, but I've written a lot of it. I don't want to be perceived as a has-been. At my age, I'm busier now than I was when I was younger. So I hope people are still liking the stuff I'm turning out. And, I'm having a good time doing it. I wish I was making a movie right now.
Well, I've been checking out the Shudder and Carmilla stuff ever since I realized that the local bookstore actually carries them. So I've been popping in every month. I've been checking those out, and yes, those are some really good. If anyone out there hasn't read them yet, it's like the classic horror comics, sort of. Would you say like Creepshow or EC?
Like the Warren publication, like Creepier and Vampirella.
Yeah,
like
but they're modern examples, and if you just like those short little bursts of horror with like a mean twist at the end or something, you should definitely check those out. And as far as I'm concerned, you are not a has-been, you are a still are.
And I get so excited about those stories. I write them and I just crank them out. And Rich has an inventory of probably about close to 100 of my stories that he hasn't published yet. So long after I have assumed room temperature, let's say, he's got stories to pick from for like maybe 10 years. Posthumous stories, And I think they just found a new Bram Stoker story. Well, they're going to be about 100 Don Glut stories, if I kick the bucket tomorrow, And I have such a good time writing those, and they're easy. The way I get the ideas from are bizarre, and how I do my work. The way I do those generally, there's two ways. One way is Rich will send me a cover painting that he's bought, and he'll say, "Can you write a story based on this painting?" And sometimes there's already been a story based on that painting because the story was used somewhere else years ago, but the painting will have 3 or 4 elements in it. And like maybe there's a vampire. Maybe there's a guy also with an axe. Maybe there's a bunch of skulls on the ground. And it's my policy. My intent is to have every one of those visual items that are represented in the painting in the story, and to have that painting as one of the panels in the story, and that's a challenge, That's the first way. The second way, which are the totally original stories, I'll be sitting and watching television, and somebody one of the characters or newscasters, will say something, as an expression like, "Remember the Alamo." Okay, and right away the wheels start turning. I'll think, how about dismember the Alamo? And then I'd say, hey, that'll be a good story. But what's the story? I have no idea. So yeah, I have the title, and then I try to think of a last panel, which they say it has a surprise ending. So a surprise ending that will tie in with that title. I still don't know what the story is going to be. I have no idea. But I know one thing. I want to do it in 6 pages. So I sit down there at the computer, and I start typing, and I come up with the first panel. So I got the first panel and the last panel. Still don't know what's going to happen in between. And I start writing. It just comes. And it comes out to 6 pages, miraculously. And that's the way I've written most of those stories. And I am having a great time doing it. And I recently I did one for an artist who said, it was an artist we really wanted to use, and he said, I would really like these elements in it. I'd like to be taking place around Halloween. I want a pumpkin patch in it. I want an old dark house. I want a pretty girl dressed as a witch. And I want zombies in it. And want a cemetery. And I did the story. I put all those together. I made a story out of it. And the most recent one was that Richard's trying to get this artist like for 2 years. And he said, okay, I'll finally do it. But here's what I want. I don't want gore. I want a surprise ending. I don't want the surprise ending to come out of left field. I want it to be sort of set up at the beginning, so there's like an irony thing, going on. And I want it in 4 pages. Now, I've never written a horror story in 4 pages. I've written 6 pages, once in 5, a lot of them in 10. And I do these 1-pagers in the Carmilla magazine, just the gag pages. The first thing in there is like a 1-page story, but never 4 pages. So all those criteria that he asked for, and if I didn't do it, he wouldn't do the story. So the wheels got turning again, and I came up with one. So he's got a story. I hope he likes it, and it meets all those requirements. But I love writing those, and sometimes I crank one out, and when I write one, it takes about 4 hours to write one. Then I put it aside. And that night when I go to sleep, when I'm trying to sleep, I got some more ideas, and I do a full rewrite the next day, changing a lot of it. And then I put it aside. I don't send it out yet. Then I sleep on it again. And in the morning, I always have these little tweaks, a comma here, or a dash there, or a change of word there. And then I'm happy with it. And then I send it off to Rich. He's never rejected one yet.
That's good.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've been picking them up since I realized I could get them easily. I might even at some point try getting all the back issues, or at least as many as I can. But again, highly recommend them. Highly recommend the Dinosaur track stuff. Highly recommend the Tales of Frankenstein movie, the new Adventures of Frankenstein books. It really is great talking to you and getting these insights, having these discussions, things like that. So thank you once again for coming back on board.
Well, I hope everybody enjoyed it. First of all, I think we had a good rapport going on, and I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope we do it. Let's do another one someday. I mean, there's always new things going on.
Sure.
And Terry Garr just died. I could tell you about my experiences with her. I met her a couple times, and once while shooting for Young Frankenstein. That was a whole another day well spent. And so I got a lot of stuff I can talk about. the whole amateur movie thing. I don't know if we talk much about that or.
I think we've done it on and off, like touched on it, but like that could be a whole thing unto itself. Maybe that'll be part 3.
Yeah, the music thing, the whole Penny Arcade thing is a whole story in itself.
Yeah, you for last time you told that crazy story about the werewolf prank you pulled.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, you can actually watch that clip on its own on my channel if you want, and check out the rest of the live stream.
Okay, so this is on now. If I have this link on my website, people can watch the show, right?
Yeah, it'll be archived as soon as we're done.
Boy, 3 hours and 19 minutes. That's a record for me. What's the longest you usually go?
I mean, the longest I've gone up to this point was 4 hours, and I didn't even have a guest that time. Yeah.
Oh, I've got a record to break. Well, who was that?
Oh, I didn't have a guest that time. It was just me doing a Q&A.
Oh.
And I had a lot of questions to get through.
Well, as Mantan Moreland says in King of the Zombies, can I help it if I'm loquacious?
Exactly. That as I've said several times, as a writer, it takes at least a paragraph to sneeze. Again,
for having me on, I appreciate it.
And thank you for being on. I appreciate it just as much. So, any way you want to sign off, feel free to say it.
Well, last time I think I signed off like the Cisco Kid. Well, in the old Rough Riders movie, I think Buck Jones or somebody would say, "So long, Rough Riders."
Very nice choice.
Well, who was that masked man? How's that? Let's go wait and
that could work. Or maybe Fu Manchu, "The world shall hear from me again."
Oh yeah, the world shall hear from us again.
Exactly. And until such time as it hears from us again, this is the Omni Viewer and Don Glut signing off.